The Vidian trade vessel Stargazer enters Earth's orbit, its sensors probing the unsuspecting planet below. Captain Zara stands on the bridge, her eyes gleaming with anticipation as the scan results flood her view screen. Earth's crust teems with rare minerals and valuable elements, a treasure trove ripe for the taking. "Initiate mining protocol," Zara commands, her voice laced with greed. "Deploy the extraction drones immediately." As the first wave of mining drones descends through Earth's atmosphere, an alarm blares in the headquarters of Earth's extraterrestrial defense force. Jacob Evans, a battle-hardened veteran, snaps to attention. He studies the incoming data, his jaw clenching as he realizes the gravity of the situation. "We've got unauthorized alien activity," Jacob announces to his team. "Multiple bogies entering Earth's atmosphere. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." The EDF springs into action, scrambling fighter jets and activating ground defenses. Jacob coordinates the response, his fingers flying over holographic displays as he directs units to intercept the alien threat. The Vidian mining drones touch down on various continents, their extraction beams piercing the Earth. But instead of easy pickings, they encounter fierce resistance. Human military forces converge on the landing sites, unleashing a barrage of advanced weaponry. Captain Zara watches in disbelief as her drones fall one by one to the humans' unexpected show of force. Her mandibles click in frustration as she reassesses her strategy. "These primitives are more resourceful than we anticipated," she hisses. "Prepare for a full-scale assault. Target their largest population center. We'll crush their will to resist." New York City becomes the focal point of the Vidian attack. Massive ships breach the cloud cover, their imposing silhouettes casting long shadows over the sprawling metropolis. Panic erupts in the streets as civilians flee, sirens wailing in the distance. Jacob Evans and his rapid response team race towards the city, their transport cutting through the air at breakneck speed. He checks his watch, knowing every second counts. EMP weapon charged and ready, his second-in-command reports. Jacob nods grimly. "On my mark." As the Vidian ships begin their descent over Manhattan, Jacob gives the order. A pulse of electromagnetic energy erupts from the EDF secret weapon, engulfing the alien crafts. Electrical systems fail, and engines sputter out. The once mighty Vidian fleet plummets from the sky, crashing into the outskirts of the city. Amidst the chaos of twisted metal and alien technology, a young Vidian scientist named Iris stumbles from the wreckage. Disoriented and alone, she surveys the unfamiliar landscape with wide eyes. The sound of approaching human vehicles sends her scrambling for cover. Jacob leads his team through the crash sites, securing alien survivors and salvaging advanced technology. He can't shake the feeling that this is only the beginning of a much larger conflict. Aboard the Stargazer, Captain Zara seethes with rage as she watches her plans unravel. But a cunning gleam enters her eyes as she formulates a new strategy. "The human forces will be searching for survivors," she muses. "And we have one of our own stranded down there. Iris may yet prove useful in turning the situation to our advantage." As night falls over New York City, both sides prepare for the next phase of the confrontation. Jacob Evans readies his forces for a potential counterattack, while Captain Zara sets her trap, using Iris as unwitting bait. The fate of Earth and its resources hangs in the balance, with humanity proving to be a far more formidable adversary than the Vidians ever imagined. As night gave way to dawn, the first rays of sunlight illuminated the smoke-filled sky over New York City. Jacob Evans, his eyes heavy from a sleepless night, stood atop the EDF's mobile command center, surveying the destruction left in the wake of the Vidian attack. The city's iconic skyline was marred by the twisted wreckage of alien ships, a stark reminder of the battle they had narrowly won. "Sir, we're ready to begin the search operation," reported a young lieutenant, her voice snapping Jacob back to the present. He nodded, turning to face his team. Deploy the thermal imaging drones and activate all ground sensors. Focus on areas with unusual energy signatures. We need to find any surviving aliens before they can regroup or cause more damage. As the EDF team sprang into action, Jacob couldn't shake the feeling that this was not nearly finished. He watched as sleek, black drones took to the air, their sensors scanning the city's outskirts for any sign of alien life. Meanwhile, hidden from human eyes, Iris, the stranded Vidian scientist, crept through the shadows of the unfamiliar urban landscape. Her heart raced as she activated her cloaking device, rendering her invisible to the primitive human surveillance systems. The towering structures of steel and glass both fascinated and terrified her as she sought a safe haven. High above Earth's atmosphere, Captain Zara paced the bridge of the Stargazer, her mandibles clicking in agitation. The humans had proven far more resilient than anticipated, but she was far from defeated. A plan began to form in her mind, a cunning strategy to turn the tables on these troublesome primitives. "Activate the hidden beacon in Iris's suit," she commanded, her voice cold and calculating. "Let's see how these humans handle a little bait." Back on Earth, Jacob's comm unit chirped with an urgent alert. "Sir, we've detected an unusual signal emanating from Brooklyn. It matches the frequency of the alien technology we've encountered." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "It could be a trap, but we can't ignore it. Assemble a strike team. We're going in." As the EDF forces converged on an abandoned warehouse in Brooklyn, Major Marcus Steele, Jacob's second-in-command, approached with a concerned expression. "Jacob, something doesn't feel right about this. The signal's too clean, too easy to track." Jacob nodded, respecting his friend's instincts. "Agreed. We'll proceed with caution. Set up a perimeter and scan for any hidden threats." Unbeknownst to the humans, Zara's cloaked Vidian shock troops had already taken position around the warehouse, ready to spring their trap. Inside, Iris realized with growing horror that she was being used as bait. Her mind raced, searching for a way to warn the humans without betraying her own people. In a moment of desperation, Iris made a decision. Using her knowledge of Vidian biochemistry, she created a trail of bioluminescent markers leading away from the warehouse. The eerie, pulsating glow stood out against the gritty urban landscape, a silent warning to those who could understand it. Jacob, ever observant, noticed the strange markings. "Hold position," he ordered his team. "Something's not right here. These markings. They're not random. It's a message." As the EDF forces reassessed their approach, Captain Zara's patience wore thin. "Enough of this subtlety," she snarled. "Launch the EMP drones. Let's remind these humans who they're dealing with." From the orbiting Vidian ship, a swarm of small, autonomous drones descended upon New York City. Each carried a powerful electromagnetic pulse device, targeting key infrastructure and military installations. Within moments, chaos erupted across the city as power grids failed and communication networks went dark. Jacob's comm unit crackled with static as reports flooded in from across the city. He turned to Marcus, his face grim. "We've got multiple EMPs hitting critical targets. We need to split up. Marcus, take half the team and coordinate the defense against these drones. I'll continue investigating the warehouse with a smaller squad." As Marcus departed with his team, Jacob led a group of his most trusted operatives towards the warehouse. The air was thick with tension, every shadow potentially concealing an alien threat. Meanwhile, Iris had managed to slip away in the confusion, finding refuge in the labyrinthine tunnels of the New York subway system. Using her advanced knowledge of Earth's digital networks, she accessed an emergency terminal, her fingers flying over the unfamiliar interface. Across the city, emergency broadcast systems crackled to life, Iris's synthesized voice echoing through the streets. "People of Earth, you are in danger. The Vidian forces are preparing for a full-scale assault. Your technology can be shielded from their EMP weapons by... Her message was cut short as Captain Zara, enraged by this betrayal, initiated a city-wide communications blackout. But the seed of resistance had been planted, and pockets of New Yorkers began to rally, following Iris's instructions to protect their devices and organize a grassroots defense. As Jacob and his team cautiously approached the warehouse, the sky above New York darkened once more. Massive Vidian warships breached the atmosphere, their imposing silhouettes blotting out the sun. Similar scenes played out across the globe as the alien force launched a coordinated assault on Earth's major cities. In the EDF's mobile command center, Dr. Alan Webb hunched over a workstation, his eyes wild with excitement. Surrounded by salvaged Vidian technology, he had just made a breakthrough that could turn the tide of the invasion. "I've found it," he muttered, reaching for his comm unit. "Jacob, do you copy? I think I've discovered a weakness in their defense systems. If we can..." The transmission cut off abruptly as another EMP blast rocked the city. Jacob, standing in the shadow of the warehouse, looked up at the looming Vidian warships. He knew that somewhere in this chaos was the key to understanding the invaders' motives and capabilities. And he was determined to find it, regardless of the cost. As the battle for Earth escalated on multiple fronts, Jacob steeled himself for the challenges ahead. The warehouse before him might hold answers, but the alien scientist who had left the bioluminescent trail was still out there, potentially their greatest asset in this interstellar war. With the fate of humanity hanging in the balance, Jacob prepared to make decisions that would shape the course of the conflict. Jacob Evans tightened his grip on his weapon as he led his squad toward the warehouse in Brooklyn. The eerie silence that had settled over the area was a stark contrast to the chaos erupting across the city. In the distance, explosions and sirens pierced the air as Marcus Steele's team engaged the Vidian EMP drones. "Stay alert," Jacob whispered to his team. "We don't know what we're walking into." He activated his advanced thermal imaging device, scanning the warehouse complex. A faint heat signature caught his attention, moving deeper into the structure. "We've got movement inside," he reported. "Let's move in, but stay sharp." As they entered the warehouse, Jacob's team was met with an unexpected sight. Holographic projections flickered to life around them, filling the space with ethereal blue light. The images shifted and changed, revealing complex diagrams and alien script. "What in the world?" muttered one of Jacob's squad members. Jacob's eyes widened as he recognized the significance of what he was seeing. "These are Vidian schematics," he said, his voice hushed with awe. "And look there! That appears to be a breakdown of their shield systems." He quickly realized that these projections must have been left behind by the mysterious alien who had created the bioluminescent trail. It was a gold mine of information that could turn the tide of the invasion. "Secure this data immediately," Jacob ordered. "Get it transmitted to EDF headquarters for analysis. This could be the key to defeating the Vidians." As his team worked to capture and transmit the holographic data, Jacob's comm unit crackled to life. The voice of Dr. Alan Webb, the EDF's chief scientist, came through, filled with excitement. "Jacob, do you copy? I've made a breakthrough." Dr. Webb's voice was almost unchecked. "The data you've been sending, it's incredible. Combined with what we've learned from the salvaged Vidian tech, I think I've identified a critical weakness in their shield systems." Jacob's heart raced at the news. "That's fantastic, Alan. What's our next move?" "I'm developing a prototype weapon that can exploit this vulnerability," Dr. Webb replied. "But I need more time. If the Vidians attack before it's ready..." Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath their feet. Jacob rushed to the warehouse entrance, his eyes scanning the sky. A massive Vidian warship was descending through the atmosphere, its hull scorched and damaged but still formidable. "Looks like time just ran out," Jacob said grimly. "Alan, you need to work faster. We've got company." As Jacob watched the warships approach, something unexpected happened. Brilliant beams of energy lanced out from orbit, striking the Vidian vessel. The ship shuddered under the assault, veering off course. "What the hell?" Jacob breathed. His comm unit chimed again, this time with a transmission from a voice he didn't recognize. "This is Admiral Helena Frost, Supreme Commander of Earth's Global Defense Forces," the stern female voice announced. "What you're witnessing is the activation of our orbital defense network. It's been kept secret, even from most of our own people." Jacob's mind reeled at this revelation. "Admiral, I had no idea we had such capabilities." "That was the point, Major Evans," Admiral Frost replied. "But even with this advantage, we're far from safe. The Vidian commander is altering course, heading straight for the EDF headquarters. Dr. Webb and his research are now their primary target." Jacob's blood ran cold. He turned to his team, who had finished securing the holographic data. "Change of plans," he announced. "We're splitting up. Half of you will rendezvous with Marcus to help defend the city. The rest are coming with me to EDF headquarters. We need to protect Dr. Webb and that prototype at all costs." As they raced through the streets of New York, Jacob's mind was working overtime. The revelation of Earth's hidden defenses, the potential breakthrough in Vidian shield technology, it all pointed to humanity being more prepared for this invasion than anyone had realized. But would it be enough? Admiral Frost's voice came through once more. "Major Evans, there's something else you need to know. We have one more ace up our sleeve. Project Thunderbolt." "What is it?" Jacob asked, his curiosity piqued. "A network of ground-based energy cannons," Frost explained, "capable of destroying Vidian ships in orbit. But using it would devastate our own satellite network and global communications. It's a last resort, one I hope we won't have to use." As they approached the EDF headquarters, Jacob could see the damaged Vidian warship looming ever closer. Smoke billowed from its hull, but it was still an imposing sight. He knew that inside that ship was the Vidian commander, determined to crush Earth's resistance. Jacob's team took up defensive positions around the building. Inside, he could hear the frantic activity as Dr. Webb and his team worked to complete the prototype weapon. The fate of Earth now rested on a race against time. Could they exploit the Vidian weakness before the aliens overwhelmed their defenses? As the Vidian warship began its final approach, Jacob steeled himself for the battle to come. The next few moments would determine the course of the invasion, and possibly the future of human-Vidian relations. With Earth's hidden strengths revealed and new alliances forming in unexpected places, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shape the destiny of both species. As the Vidian warship began its final approach, Jacob steeled himself for the battle to come. The ground trembled beneath his feet, and the air filled with the ominous hum of alien engines. Smoke and debris rained down from the damaged hull, creating an apocalyptic scene in the streets of New York. "Move out!" Jacob barked to his team, now reduced to a small squad of elite operatives. They weaved through the chaos, narrowly avoiding falling chunks of alien technology and panicked civilians fleeing for safety. The comm unit crackled to life once more. "Major Evans, this is Dr. Webb. The prototype is nearly complete, but we're under heavy fire. The Vidians are targeting the facility's defenses. We need more time." Jacob gritted his teeth, pushing his team to move faster through the debris-strewn streets. "Hold on, Alan. We're on our way." As they approached the EDF headquarters, the full scale of the assault became apparent. The Vidian warship hung low in the sky, its weapon systems unleashing a relentless barrage of energy blasts against the building's shields. Each impact sent shock waves through the ground, shattering nearby windows and setting off car alarms. Inside the facility, Dr. Webb worked feverishly, his fingers flying over holographic displays as he put the finishing touches on the anti-Vidian weapon. Sweat beaded on his forehead as another blast rocked the building. With a grimace, He initiated an emergency data transfer, backing up his research to a secure off-site location. "Just in case," he muttered, returning his focus to the prototype. Across the city, Marcus Steele led the defense against the Vidian EMP drones. His team had made progress, thanks to Iris's broadcast, but the constant onslaught was taking its toll. Buildings crumbled, power grids failed, and the exhausted human defenders struggled to keep pace with the alien technology. "Keep pushing," Marcus shouted, taking aim at another drone. "We can't let them gain a foothold." Meanwhile, deep in the subway tunnels, Iris and her group of human civilians made an unexpected discovery. Their path blocked by collapsed tunnels, they had stumbled upon a hidden entrance, its surface covered in decades of grime and neglect. "This is no ordinary door," Iris observed, running her hand over the corroded metal. She pulled out a small device, its alien design a stark contrast to the archaic human technology surrounding them. With a few deft movements, she bypassed the ancient security systems, and the door groaned open. "By the stars," she breathed, as the group peered into the darkness beyond. It's a Cold War bunker. Back at the EDF headquarters, Jacob and his team arrived just as the Vidian ground forces breached the outer defenses. Clad in sleek, advanced battle armor, the alien shock troops poured into the building's lower levels. "Secure the stairwells and elevators," Jacob ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We need to funnel them into choke points. Use guerrilla tactics, hit and fade. We just need to buy Dr. Webb more time." As his team spread out, taking up defensive positions, Jacob's comm unit chirped urgently. Admiral Frost's voice came through, tense and clipped. "Major Evans, we have a critical situation. Multiple Vidian reinforcement ships have been detected entering the solar system. Earth's forces are stretched to the breaking point." Jacob's heart sank as he realized the implications. "What are your orders, Admiral?" There was a moment of hesitation before Frost replied, "I'm authorizing the activation of Project Thunderbolt. May God help us all." As Jacob processed this information, the battle around him intensified. Vidian energy weapons scorched the walls, and the acrid smell of ozone filled the air. His team fought valiantly, using their knowledge of the building's layout to outmaneuver the alien invaders. In orbit, the hidden network of human defense satellites sprang to life. The space above Earth erupted into a spectacular display as human and Vidian weapons clashed. Several alien ships were caught off guard, their hulls rupturing under the unexpected assault. But more kept coming, threatening to overwhelm Earth's last line of defense. Inside Dr. Webb's lab, the prototype weapon hummed to life, its components glowing with an otherworldly energy. The scientist allowed himself a moment of triumph before the lab security doors buckled under a concentrated Vidian attack. "It's now or never," Webb muttered, activating the device. A pulse of energy radiated outward, passing harmlessly through human technology, but wreaking havoc on the Vidian systems. Alien shields flickered and died, weapon systems went offline, and the invaders suddenly found themselves vulnerable. In the command center of her warship, Captain Zara snarled in frustration as reports of system failures flooded in. She rose from her command chair, her eyes blazing with perseverance. "Prepare my personal guard," she ordered. "If these humans want to fight, I'll give them one they won't forget." As Jacob fought his way towards Dr. Webb's lab, his comm unit crackled once more. An unfamiliar voice came through, tinged with an alien accent. "Major Evans, this is Iris. I've accessed your communication network using some resourceful methods. I have critical information about Captain Czar's tactics and weaknesses. Will you trust me?" Jacob hesitated, the sounds of battle drawing ever closer. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, and he had mere seconds to make a decision that could alter the course of the entire conflict. Invasion. Jacob's heart raced as he made his decision. "Iris, I'm trusting you," he said, his voice firm despite the chaos around him. "What do you have?" As Iris relayed her intelligence, Jacob's mind raced, formulating a new strategy. He quickly shared the information with his team, outlining a revised plan to counter Captain Zara's elite squad. "Listen up," Jacob barked to his team. "We're changing tactics. Zara's troops are vulnerable to rapid changes in engagement distance. We'll use hit-and-run tactics, keeping them off balance." Inside the lab, Dr. Webb worked frantically, aware of the approaching danger. He began disassembling the prototype weapon, distributing its key components among the remaining EDF personnel. "If they breach our defenses, they won't get the whole device," Webb muttered, handing a crucial piece to his assistant. "Protect this with your life." Outside, Major Marcus Steele's forces made a breakthrough against the Vidian EMP drones. Using Iris's earlier broadcast, they developed a countermeasure that scrambled the drone's control systems. "It's working," Marcus shouted, watching as another drone fell from the sky. "Push forward. We need to reinforce the EDF building." In orbit, the space battle reached a fever pitch as Project Thunderbolt activated. The ground-based energy cannons fired in unison, their beams slicing through the Vidian fleet. Alien ships exploded in brilliant flashes, but the power drain was immense. Across the eastern seaboard, cities went dark, plunging New York into an eerie blackness. Captain Zara and her elite team seized the moment, breaching the outer defenses of the EDF headquarters. They moved with practiced precision, their advanced weaponry adapting to human tactics. Jacob's team, now armed with Iris's intelligence, set up a series of ambushes. As Zara's squad rounded a corner, they were met with a barrage of gunfire from unexpected angles. The Vidians faltered, caught off guard by the humans' unconventional approach. Deep in the subway tunnels, Iris and her group of civilians prepared for action. A grizzled veteran among them, John, took charge of their impromptu resistance. "We can hit them where they least expect it," John said, outlining their plan. "Iris, can you disrupt their comms?" Iris nodded, her alien device already interfacing with human technology. "I can create a localized jamming field. It won't last long, but it should be enough to sow confusion." Back at the EDF headquarters, the battle intensified. Jacob engaged in a fierce firefight with Zara's troops, the close-quarters combat pushing both sides to their limits. He ducked behind a collapsed pillar, narrowly avoiding a burst of Vidian energy fire. "Now, Webb!" Jacob shouted into his comm unit. In the lab, Dr. Webb activated a partial version of the anti-Vidian weapon. A pulse of energy radiated outward, and suddenly, the Vidian energy weapons went dead. Captain Zara snarled in frustration as her weapon failed. "Hand to hand," she ordered her troops, drawing a wicked-looking blade from her armor. The battle devolved into a brutal melee. Jacob's team, though outnumbered, held their ground, using their knowledge of the building to their advantage. Zara's elite warriors, stripped of their technological edge, found themselves struggling against the determined human defenders. In the confusion, Zara became separated from her squad. She retreated deeper into the building, her eyes scanning for an alternate route to the lab. The humans' resourcefulness had caught her off guard, but she was far from defeated. Outside, the Vidian ground forces began to falter. Iris and her group's sabotage efforts bore fruit as alien communication systems failed, and carefully placed traps disrupted their formations. Major Steele, seizing the opportunity, ordered a full-scale counteroffensive. "Push them back!" Steele roared, leading the charge. "We're taking back our city." In orbit, the remaining Vidian ships adopted a new strategy. They began targeting Earth's satellite network, attempting to cripple the global defense coordination. Admiral Helena Frost watched the tactical displays with growing concern. "We can't lose our comms," she muttered, weighing her options. Divert half our remaining orbital defenses to protect the satellite network. The ground forces will have to hold their own. As the battle raged across multiple fronts, a new threat emerged. A massive Vidian ship, dwarfing all others, appeared at the edge of the solar system. Its presence sent a chill through the human command structure. "What is that thing?" Frost demanded, staring at the readings. Her science officer's voice was grim. "It's some kind of gravitational weapon, Admiral. If it reaches Earth." Jacob, unaware of this new threat, pressed his advantage in the EDF building. He and his team had cornered the remnants of Zara's squad, but the Vidian captain herself remained elusive. "Find Zara," Jacob ordered, ducking as a piece of debris flew past his head. "She's the key to ending this." As Jacob moved deeper into the building, searching for the Vidian captain, the battle for Earth entered its most critical phase. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, with threats both on the ground and in space pushing human defenders to their limits. The next few moments would determine whether Earth would fall or emerge victorious against the alien invaders. Invasion. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, as threats both on the ground and in space pushed human defenders to their limits. The next few moments would determine whether Earth would fall or emerge victorious against the alien onslaught. Amidst the chaos, Dr. Alan Webb's eyes widened as he stared at the holographic display before him. His fingers flew across the interface, double-checking his findings. "This can't be," he muttered, but the data was clear. The Vidian technology had a critical weakness, a specific frequency of electromagnetic radiation that could disrupt their systems. Webb's heart raced as he realized the implications. He activated his comm unit, his voice urgent. "Admiral Frost, I've made a breakthrough. The Vidians are vulnerable to a particular EM frequency. We can use our existing communications infrastructure to generate it." In orbit, Admiral Frost received Webb's transmission with a mix of hope and skepticism. "Are you certain, Doctor? We can't afford any mistakes at this point." "Positive, Admiral," Webb replied, his voice steady despite the sounds of battle echoing through the lab. "If we can repurpose our global satellite network, we could emit a pulse powerful enough to cripple their entire fleet." As Frost contemplated this new information, Jacob Evans and his team pursued Captain Zara through the winding corridors of the EDF headquarters. They moved with practiced efficiency, using Iris's intelligence to anticipate the Vidian leader's tactics. "She's heading for the power core," Jacob shouted, gesturing to a junction ahead. "Martinez, take your squad and flank her from the east. We'll cut her off at the main access point." The team split up, their footsteps echoing in the dim emergency lighting. Jacob's breath came in short bursts as he sprinted down the hallway, his rifle at the ready. Outside, Major Marcus Steele's voice boomed across the battlefield. "Push forward. We've got them on the run." His forces surged ahead, reclaiming block after block of New York City. The Vidian ground troops, still reeling from the earlier sabotage, struggled to maintain their positions. In the sky above, the massive Vidian ship carrying the gravitational weapon entered Earth's atmosphere, its hull gleaming ominously in the sunlight. Admiral Frost's face was grim as she issued her orders. "Divert all orbital defenses to that ship," she commanded. "We can't let it get any closer to the surface." As Earth's remaining satellites and defense platforms turned their firepower on the approaching threat, Frost opened a secure channel to a hidden facility in Siberia. "Colonel Petrov, this is Admiral Frost. We need your EMP facility at full power immediately." The gruff voice of Colonel Viktor Petrov crackled through the comm. "Admiral, you're asking for a lot. This level of power could have unpredictable consequences." "We're out of options, Colonel," Frost replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. "The fate of Earth depends on it." Back in the EDF headquarters, Jacob and his team cornered Zara in the cavernous power core room. The Vidian captain stood defiantly near a bank of critical systems, Her alien features twisted in a snarl. "It's over, Zara," Jacob called out, his weapon trained on her. "Stand down." Zara's response was a blur of motion as she lunged forward, her inhuman speed catching Jacob off guard. He barely managed to deflect her first strike, feeling the air displaced by her fist as it whistled past his ear. The two opponents engaged in a fierce hand-to-hand struggle, their movements a deadly dance amidst the humming machinery. Jacob's years of combat experience allowed him to hold his own, but Zara's alien physiology gave her a significant advantage. As they fought, Dr. Webb's voice came through Jacob's comm unit. "Major, we're about to initiate a global EMP burst. Brace for impact." Jacob's momentary distraction cost him as Zara's fist connected with his jaw, sending him staggering backward. He tasted blood but kept his footing, circling warily as he waited for an opening. In the lab, Webb coordinated with Admiral Frost and Colonel Petrov, fine-tuning the electromagnetic pulse to the precise frequency needed to disrupt Vidian technology. The energy buildup caused lights to flicker and electronics to malfunction across the globe. Suddenly, the door to Webb's lab burst open. Iris and her group of civilians rushed in, their faces streaked with dirt and commitment. "Dr. Webb," Iris called out, her alien accent unmistakable. "We're here to help. What do you need?" Webb's surprise quickly gave way to relief. "Help me stabilize these emitters," he said, gesturing to a bank of equipment. "We need to maintain the frequency for as long as possible." As Iris and her team got to work, the massive Vidian ship loomed ever closer to Earth's surface. Admiral Frost's voice rang out across all channels. "All personnel, brace for electromagnetic pulse. Initiating countermeasure now." In the power core, Jacob and Zara paused in their combat, both sensing the buildup of energy. For a moment, the fate of two species hung in the balance as the electromagnetic pulse surged outward from Earth. The EDF headquarters plunged into darkness, along with the rest of the planet. In the eerie silence that followed, Jacob tensed, waiting for the pulse to reach the Vidian forces and their terrifying weapon. Weapons surged outward from Earth. The EDF headquarters plunged into darkness, along with the rest of the planet. In the eerie silence that followed, Jacob tensed, waiting for the pulse to reach the Vidian forces and their terrifying technology. A heartbeat later, the world around him transformed. The ever-present hum of machinery died, leaving an unsettling quiet in its wake. Emergency lights flickered weakly, casting long shadows across the power core room. Zara stumbled, her movements suddenly clumsy and uncoordinated. Her eyes widened in shock as she realized her advanced suit had gone dead. Jacob seized the opportunity, lunging forward with renewed energy. His fist connected with Zara's jaw, sending her reeling backward. She recovered quickly, but without her enhanced reflexes, she was no match for Jacob's years of hand-to-hand combat training. "Not so tough without your fancy tech, are you?" Jacob growled, pressing his advantage. Zara snarled, lashing out with a vicious kick that Jacob barely managed to dodge. The two opponents circled each other warily, the dim emergency lighting casting their faces in stark relief. Outside New York City had become a battlefield of shadows. Major Marcus Steele squinted through the darkness, his eyes adjusting to the sudden absence of streetlights and neon signs. "All units push forward," he barked into his radio, praying the EMP hadn't fried their communication equipment. To his relief, a chorus of affirmatives crackled back. Steele's troops surged ahead, their night vision goggles giving them a crucial advantage over the disoriented Vidian ground forces. The aliens stumbled in the darkness, their energy weapons rendered useless by the electromagnetic pulse. High above the Earth's surface, Admiral Helena Frost watched in grim satisfaction as the Vidian fleet's shields flickered and failed. The massive ship carrying the gravitational weapon, caught in the upper atmosphere, began to list dangerously. "Direct all available firepower on that ship," Frost ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. "We can't let it reach the surface intact." As Earth's remaining defense platforms concentrated their fire on the falling Vidian vessel, Frost's command bunker erupted into frantic activity. Communications officers struggled to re-establish contact with ground forces, while tactical analysts pored over the limited data still coming in. "Admiral, we've lost most of our satellite network," a young lieutenant reported, his face pale in the glow of emergency lighting. "We're operating on backup systems and pre-established protocols." Frost nodded grimly. "Get me Colonel Petrov in Siberia. We need that EMP facility at full power to maintain our advantage." In the streets of New York, Iris and her group of civilian resistance fighters emerged from the subway tunnels, blinking in the eerie twilight of a city without power. They watched in awe as human forces pushed back against the faltering Vidian invaders. "We need to help coordinate," Iris said, her alien accent thick with persistence. "John, can we use that old radio equipment we found?" The grizzled veteran nodded, already unpacking their salvage gear. "It's not pretty, but it should work. Let's set up a relay station and get these troops talking to each other." Back at the EDF headquarters, Dr. Alan Webb worked feverishly to restore power to critical systems. His fingers flew across makeshift control panels, jury-rigged from a combination of human and Vidian technology. Come on," he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. A bank of monitors flickered to life, showing grainy feeds from security cameras throughout the building. "Yes." Webb's triumph was short-lived as he spotted a group of Vidian soldiers attempting to breach the facility's outer defenses. Without their energy weapons, they resorted to brute force, using improvised battering rams against the reinforced doors. Security teamed to the main entrance. Webb barked into a backup comm system. "We've got company." In orbit, the massive Vidian ship continued its uncontrolled descent, its hull glowing red-hot as it entered the thicker layers of Earth's atmosphere. Colonel Victor Petrov's voice crackled through Admiral Frost's emergency comm line. "Admiral, we have a plan," the Russian officer said, his accent thick with urgency. "Our ground-based laser arrays might be able to break up that ship before impact. It's risky, but it's our best shot." Frost weighed the options quickly. "Do it, Colonel. We're out of time and out of options." As Petrov's team began powering up their laser array, Jacob Evans finally gained the upper hand in his battle with Captain Zara. The Vidian leader, stripped of her technological advantages, found herself outmatched by Jacob's superior close-quarters combat skills. Zara stumbled backward, her hand fumbling for a device on her belt. Jacob recognized it as some kind of Vidian weapon and tensed, prepared for a last-ditch attack. But nothing happened. The device remained inert, rendered useless by the EMP. Taking advantage of Zara's moment of confusion, Jacob surged forward. His fist connected with her solar plexus, driving the air from her lungs. As she doubled over, gasping, Jacob swept her legs out from under her and pinned her to the ground. "It's over, Zara," he panted, securing her hands behind her back with a zip tie. "Your invasion has failed." As Jacob hauled the captured Vidian captain to her feet, his comm unit crackled to life. Admiral Frost's voice came through, strained but determined. "All units, be advised. We have a new asset joining the fight. General Tanaka's mech division from Japan is en route to assist with urban combat operations." Jacob's eyes widened at the news. He'd heard rumors of Japan's experimental mech suits, but never imagined he'd see them in action. As he marched Zara towards a near secure holding area, he couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. The battle for Earth was just getting started, but for the first time since the Vidian invasion began, humanity had seized the initiative. With the EMP's effects slowly fading and Earth systems coming back online, the true scale of the conflict was becoming apparent. As Jacob secured Zara in a makeshift cell, he heard the distant rumble of explosions. Whether it was the sound of the falling Vidian ship breaking up in the atmosphere or the arrival of Tanaka's mech division, he couldn't be sure. But one thing was certain. The war had entered a new phase, and Earth was fighting back with everything it had everything it could muster. The tide was turning, but the fight was just the beginning. As Jacob secured the makeshift cell door, locking Zara inside, he felt a tremor run through the building. The emergency lights flickered, and he instinctively braced himself against the wall. His comm unit crackled to life, Admiral Frost's voice cutting through the static. All units, be advised. The EMP's effects are starting to fade. Prepare for potential reactivation of Vidian tech. Jacob's eyes darted to Zara, who sat motionless in her cell, her alien features unreadable. He tapped his comm unit. Admiral, this is Major Evans. I've secured the Vidian captain. What are your orders? Hold your position, Major, Frost replied. Dr. Webb is on his way to begin interrogation. We need every scrap of intel we can get. As if on cue, the door at the end of the corridor hissed open, revealing Dr. Alan Webb. The scientist looked haggard, his lab coat streaked with grime, but his eyes were sharp and focused. Good work, Jacob, Webb said, nodding towards the cell. Let's see what our guest can tell us about that gravitational weapon. Outside the EDF headquarters, New York City had become a war zone unlike any in human history. Major Marcus Steele crouched behind an overturned police cruiser, his rifle at the ready. The eerie silence that had followed the EMP was giving way to the sounds of renewed combat. Delta Team, push up to Fifth Avenue. Steele barked into his radio. Bravo, I want you flanking from the east. We need to box these bastards in. As his troops moved into position, Steele caught sight of something that made his heart skip a beat. A group of civilians, led by a woman with distinctly alien features, was setting up what looked like makeshift communication equipment on a nearby rooftop. This is Major Steele, he called out, his voice carrying across the debris-strewn street. Identify yourselves. The woman turned, her eyes meeting Steele's. I'm Iris, she shouted back. We're here to help. We've got a network of relays set up across the city. We can coordinate rescue efforts, troop movements, anything you need. Steele hesitated for a moment, then made a decision. All right, Iris. Let's see what you've got. We need to evacuate civilians from the potential impact zones of that Vidian ship. As Steele began coordinating with Iris and her team, the sky above New York lit up with an otherworldly glow. Streaks of blinding light crisscrossed the atmosphere, converging on a massive, falling object. In her hardened command bunker, Admiral Helena Frost watched the feeds from the few remaining functional satellites. The Vidian ship, carrying the gravitational weapon, was breaking apart under the assault from Colonel Petrov's laser array. It's working, Frost muttered, her eyes fixed on the screens. But at what cost? As the ship disintegrated, smaller fragments began raining down across a wide swath of the eastern seaboard. Frost's fingers flew across her console, redirecting resources to deal with the new threat. All available units. We have multiple impact zones, she announced. Prioritize populated areas and critical infrastructure. In Japan, General Hiroaki Tanaka received Frost's transmission. He stood before a massive hangar, where towering humanoid shapes loomed in the shadows. It's time, Tanaka said, turning to his pilots. Show the world what these mechs can do. The hangar door slid open with a thunderous rumble, revealing a dozen colossal war machines. Each mech stood over 5 stories tall, overflowing with weapons and advanced sensors. As the pilots climbed into their cockpits, Tanaka allowed himself a small smile. The Vidians were about to face something they had never encountered before. Back at the EDF headquarters, Jacob and Dr. Webb stood before Zara's cell. The Vidian captain glared at them defiantly. You're fighting a losing battle, Zara hissed. Even now, Commander Zara approaches. You think you've won, but you've only delayed the inevitable. Webb's eyes widened. Commander Zar? Who is that? Before Zara could respond, an explosion rocked the building. Alarms blared, and the emergency lights flashed red. Warning. Perimeter breach detected. An automated voice announced. Unknown hostiles have entered the facility. Jacob's hand went to his weapon. Looks like we've got company, Doc. We need to move. As Jacob and Webb prepared to relocate their prisoner, a new threat was emerging far to the north. In the icy waste of the Arctic Circle, a hidden Vidian base stirred to life. Massive generators hummed, powering up a weapon that dwarfed even the gravitational device they had feared. Deep beneath the ice, Vidian technicians worked feverishly, their movements precise despite the urgency of their task. A holographic display showed the Earth's core, pulsing with energy. The weapon is at 60% power, one technician reported. Estimated time to full capacity, 30 minutes. As the Arctic weapon powered up, its energy signature rippled through the planet's crust. Across the globe, seismographs began registering unprecedented activity. In cities already battered by the invasion, the ground began to shake. In New York, Major Steele felt the tremor and looked up from his makeshift command post. Iris, her face pale, turned to him. "What was that?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the rumble. Steele's comm unit crackled to life. Admiral Frost's voice filled with a tension he had never heard before. "All units be advised," Frost said. "We have detected a massive energy signature in the Arctic. Unknown purpose, but it's causing global seismic activity. This is a Priority 1 threat. I repeat, Priority 1. As Steele processed this new information, the sky above New York lit up once more. But this time, it wasn't a laser array. A dozen massive shapes descended through the clouds, their metal frames gleaming in the late afternoon sun. General Tanaka's voice came through on all channels. "This is the Japanese Mech Division. We are here to assist. All ground forces, coordinate your efforts with our pilots." As the mechs touched down in the streets of New York, their impact shaking the already unstable ground, Steele couldn't help but feel a spark of hope. The battle for Earth had entered a new phase, and humanity was bringing everything it had to the fight. But even as Earth's defenders rallied, new threats loomed. Commander Zar's stealth team was closing in on the EDF headquarters. The Arctic weapon continued to power up, and fragments of the destroyed Vidian ship rained down from the sky. The next few hours would determine not just the outcome of the battle, but the fate of the entire planet. As the tremor subsided, Admiral Helena Frost's eyes narrowed, focusing on the satellite imagery displaying the Arctic Circle. The newly activated Vidian base pulsed with an ominous energy signature, its potential for devastation all too clear. "This changes everything," Frost muttered, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. She opened a secure channel to her top commanders. "All units, we have a new primary objective. The Arctic base is now our top priority. I'm authorizing the formation of a joint task force to neutralize this threat." Frost's gaze swept across the command center, taking in the grim faces of her staff. "Get me Major Sarah Hawkins. We're going to need her for this one." As Frost coordinated the assault on the Arctic base, the sky above New York City erupted into a dazzling, terrifying spectacle. Fragments of the destroyed Vidian ship streaked through the atmosphere, leaving trails of fire in their wake. Major Marcus Steele surveyed the chaotic scene from his makeshift command post, his face hardened. "Iris," he called out to the alien ally, "we need to expand our evacuation efforts. Those impacts are going to cause more damage than we anticipated." Iris nodded, her fingers dancing across her improvised communications array. "I'm relaying updated coordinates to your teams now, Major." Steele turned to face the towering mech that had just touched down in the city. "General Tanaka, we need your units to assist with evacuation and debris clearance." Those Mets of yours are our best bet for getting civilians out of collapsing structures. Understood, Major. Tanaka's voice crackled through the comm. We're on it. As the Mets moved out, their massive frames navigating the debris-strewn streets with surprising grace, Steele couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. It was quickly extinguished as another tremor shook the ground, a reminder of the looming threat from the Arctic. Back at the EDF headquarters, Jacob Evans and Dr. Alan Webb continued their interrogation of Captain Zara. The Vidian captain's earlier bravado had faded, replaced by a wary resignation. This Arctic base, Webb pressed, leaning in close to the cell's transparent barrier. What's its purpose? Zara's alien features contorted in what might have been a sneer. It's more than just a weapon. It's our failsafe, our backup command center. If you thought this invasion was bad, you haven't seen anything yet. Jacob's comm unit buzzed. He stepped away, listening intently as Iris's voice came through, urgent and breathless. Jacob, we've picked up something on our sensors. There's a stealth team approaching the building. They must have tech that survived the EMP. Understood, Jacob replied, his mind racing. Sound the alarm. I'll coordinate our defense. As Jacob moved to alert the security teams, the building shook violently. Alarms blared, and the sound of weapons fire echoed through the corridors. Perimeter breach. A voice shouted over the comms. Unknown hostiles have entered the facility. Amidst the chaos, a gruff voice cut through the noise. This is Sergeant Mike Torres. All security personnel, report to your designated positions. We've got incoming hostiles, likely Vidian Special Forces. Jacob sprinted towards the main security hub, nearly colliding with Sergeant Torres as he rounded a corner. The burly ex-Marine's face was a mask of steadfast perseverance. Major Evans, Torres nodded. Looks like we've got ourselves a situation. I've got teams setting up choke points, but we're going to need every able body to hold this place. Jacob nodded, his hand tightening on his weapon. Agreed. We can't let them get their hands on Zara or any of the tech we've secured. What's your plan? As Torres outlined their defense strategy, the battle for the EDF headquarters began in earnest. Commander Zara's elite commandos, their advanced armor gleaming despite the building's flickering lights, pushed deeper into the facility. High above the Earth's surface, Colonel Alexei Volkov floated in zero gravity, his eyes wide as he took in the scene before him. The disabled Vidian ships hung in space like massive, alien sculptures. But the beauty of the moment was shattered by a series of rapid beeps from his suit's computer. Colonel, one of his team members called out, voice tight with urgency. We're detecting energy spikes from multiple vessels. It looks like they've initiated some kind of self-destruct sequence. Volkov's mind raced, weighing the potential gains against the immense risk. The technology aboard these ships could give humanity a fighting chance, but at what cost? Team leaders report in. He barked into his comm. What's your status? As his teams reported their positions and findings, Volkov made his decision. All teams, priority is disabling those self-destruct mechanisms. We cannot lose this opportunity. Move fast, stay alert, and may God be with us. With that, Volkov propelled himself towards the nearest Vidian ship, his team following close behind. The race against time had begun, with the fate of Earth's technological future hanging in the balance. Meanwhile, in the frozen wasteland of the Arctic Circle, Major Sarah Hawkins led her team across the treacherous terrain. Operation Icepick had begun, but nature itself seemed to be conspiring against them. Watch your step, Hawkins warned, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. The ice is unstable. That weapon has melted more than we anticipated. As if to emphasize her point, a massive crack split the ice before them, a chasm opening where solid ground had been moments before. One of her team members, caught off guard, slid towards the edge. Hawkins lunged, catching the soldier's arm and hauling him back to safety. "Thanks, Major," the soldier gasped, his eyes wide behind his goggles. Hawkins nodded grimly. "Stay focused. We've got a long way to go, and that base isn't going to take itself out." As Operation Icepick pushed forward, the Vidian base loomed in the distance, a dark blot against the white landscape. Inside, alien technicians worked feverishly, unaware of the approaching human forces. The energy weapon pulsed, reaching full power. A Vidian commander, his features hidden behind an elaborate mask, approached the central console. "Begin the test fire sequence," he ordered. As the subordinates complied, the weapon hummed to life. The air itself seemed to vibrate as unimaginable energy was channeled into the Earth's core. The resulting tremor was unlike anything the planet had ever experienced. Across the globe, the effects were immediate and catastrophic. Tsunamis rose from placid seas, earthquakes shook cities already battered by invasion, and fault lines long dormant suddenly sprang to life. In New York, Major Steele stumbled as the ground beneath him heaved. He watched in horror as a nearby skyscraper, weakened by earlier battles, began to collapse. "Tanaka!" he shouted into his comm. "We need those mechs now." As Steele coordinated the increasingly desperate evacuation efforts, Jacob and Sergeant Torres fought to repel Tsar's forces at the EDF headquarters. And Colonel Volkov raced to secure crucial alien technology in orbit. The true scale of the threat became clear. The Arctic weapon had the potential to literally tear the planet apart. Major Hawkins, observing the distant base through high-power binoculars, set her jaw in persistence. "All right, team," she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Let's move. The clock's ticking, and we've got a planet to save." As Operation Icepick began its final approach to the Vidian base, the fate of Earth hung in the balance. The next few hours would determine not just the outcome of the battle, but the very survival of humanity. As Operation Icepick began its final approach to the Vidian base, the fate of Earth hung in the balance. The next few hours would determine not just the outcome of the battle, but the very survival of humanity. Major Sarah Hawkins and her team pushed forward, their prototype ice-traversing vehicles cutting through the treacherous Arctic terrain. "Team, switch to thermal imaging," Hawkins ordered, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. "The weapons test fire has made this ice more unstable than we anticipated." Through their enhanced visors, the world transformed into a landscape of blues and reds. The Vidian base loomed ahead, a pulsing mass of heat against a frigid backdrop. "Major, look," one of her team members called out, pointing to a series of heat signatures moving beneath the ice. Hawkins zoomed in, her eyes narrowing. "They've expanded underground. This just got a lot more complicated." As Operation Icepick closed in on their target, chaos erupted at the EDF headquarters. Jacob Evans and Sergeant Mike Bull Torres stood side by side, their weapons trained on the corridor ahead. "They're coming in hot," Torres bellowed, his massive frame filling the doorway. "Evans, we need to fall back to the next choke point." Jacob nodded, tapping his comm unit. "All units, fall back to position Bravo. I repeat, fall back to position Bravo." The sound of alien weapons fire grew closer as Commander Czar's elite commandos pushed deeper into the facility. Jacob and Torres retreated, laying down suppressing fire as they went. "We can't let them reach the containment cells," Jacob shouted over the din. "If they free Captain Zara, we lose our biggest advantage." Torres grinned, a feral look in his eyes. "Don't worry, kid. They'll have to go through me first." High above the Earth's surface, Colonel Alexei Volkov made his decision. "All teams, prioritize the 3 largest vessels," he ordered, his voice calm despite the urgency of the situation. "We can't save them all, but we can secure the biggest prizes." Volkov watched as his team split up, each group racing towards a massive Vidian ship. In the distance, smaller vessels began to detonate, their explosions silent in the vacuum of space, but visible as brilliant flashes of light. "Sir," one of his team members called out, "we've got company." Volkov turned to see a squadron of Vidian fighters approaching, their sleek forms cutting through the debris field. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted. "We need more time." As if in answer to his plea, a voice crackled over the comm. "This is Captain Marcus Sterling of Earth Orbital Defense. We've got your back, Colonel." A dozen state-of-the-art space fighters streaked past Volkov's position, engaging the Vidian craft in a furious dogfight. The human pilots, led by Sterling, weaved through the debris field with incredible skill, turning the alien superior technology against them. "Nice of you to join the party, Captain," Volkov said, allowing himself a small smile. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, sir," Sterling replied, his fighter executing a perfect barrel roll to avoid enemy fire. Back on Earth, Admiral Helena Frost's command center had become a hub of frenetic activity. Holographic displays showed the trajectories of thousands of Vidian ship fragments hurtling towards the planet's surface. "Status report on the Global Missile Defense Network," Frost demanded, her eyes never leaving the main screen. "Online and operational, Admiral," a technician reported. "We are coordinating with defense systems from over 30 countries." Frost nodded, her expression grim. "Prepare to engage. Prioritize the largest fragments and those on course for major population centers." As the Admiral gave the order, the sky lit up with thousands of missiles launching from sites across the globe. The impromptu defense grid sprang into action, a testament to humanity's ability to unite in the face of overwhelming odds. In the Arctic, Major Hawkins and her team had breached the outer defenses of the Vidian base. They moved swiftly through alien corridors, their weapons at the ready. "This place is massive," Hawkins muttered, consulting the 3D map generated by their scanners. "All right, we need to split up. Gamma team, head for the energy weapon and plant the charges. The rest of you, with me. We're taking the control center." As the two groups separated, Hawkins led her team deeper into the heart of the base. They encountered sporadic resistance from automated defense systems and the occasional Vidian scientist, but nothing they couldn't handle. "Major," one of her soldiers called out, "I'm picking up a massive energy signature ahead. It's got to be the control center." Hawkins nodded, signaling her team to take up positions around the sealed door. "This is it, people. Whatever's on the other side of this door could decide the fate of our entire planet. Let's make it count." At the EDF headquarters, Dr. Alan Webb burst into the makeshift command center, his eyes wild with excitement. "Jacob, I've got it," he exclaimed, waving a data pad. "I've found a way to use their own comm systems against them." Jacob turned from the tactical display, his interest piqued despite the ongoing battle. "What do you mean, Doc?" "We can broadcast a disruptive signal," Webb explained breathlessly. "It could potentially disable all their remaining active technology. But we need to get close to their command ships in orbit to transmit it effectively." Jacob's mind raced, considering the possibilities. "Get me a secure line to Colonel Volkov," he ordered a nearby technician. "And someone find me Captain Sterling. We might have just found our ace in the hole." As Earth's defenders fought on multiple fronts, the Vidian High Command observed from their flagship on the far side of the moon. The alien leaders, their features hidden behind ornate masks, conferred in hushed tones. "This cannot be," one hissed, gesturing at the holographic display showing the battle unfolding across Earth and in orbit. "How are these primitives offering such resistance?" The lead commander, his mask more elaborate than the others, stood silent for a moment before speaking. "We have gravely underestimated this species," he said, his voice permeated with a mixture of admiration and frustration. "Initiate emergency protocols. Commit the reserve fleet. We will not be denied victory." As the order was given, hundreds of Vidian ships began to power up, their hulls gleaming in the stark moonlight. The reinforcements would arrive in Earth orbit within hours, tipping the scales decisively in the invaders' favor. The next phase of the battle was about to begin, with humanity's survival hanging by a thread. From the Arctic to orbit, from New York to the command centers coordinating the global defense, Earth's protectors steeled themselves for the challenges ahead. The Vidian invasion had brought the planet to the brink of destruction, but humanity's resilience and ingenuity had kept them in the fight. Now, as new threats loomed and opportunities arose, the defenders of Earth prepared to make their stand. Final stand. Major Sarah Hawkins and her team pushed deeper into the Vidian base, their boots echoing on the alien metal floors. The air grew thicker with tension as they encountered increasingly desperate resistance from the alien scientists. "Contact front," shouted Corporal Rodriguez, opening fire on a group of Vidians who had set up a makeshift barricade. Hawkins dove for cover, her mind racing. The close quarters of the base's interior played to their strengths, negating much of the Vidians' technological superiority. She signaled to her team, and they fanned out, using the corridor's twisting architecture to outflank the enemy position. "Flashbang out," Hawkins called, tossing a stun grenade over the barricade. The resulting explosion and disorientation allowed her team to swiftly neutralize the Vidian defenders. As they pressed forward, the team's tactical displays lit up with new information. "Major," Privatchin reported, "I'm picking up a massive energy signature ahead. It's got to be the weapons core." Hawkins nodded grimly. "Let's move. We're running out of time." At the EDF headquarters, Jacob Evans and Sergeant Mike Bull, Taurus orchestrated a masterful defense against Commander Czar's elite commandos. The human defenders had transformed the familiar corridors into a deadly maze of improvised traps and ambush points. "Bull, how's it looking on your end?" Jacob's voice crackled over the comm. Taurus grinned, despite the sweat dripping down his face. "Like shooting fish in a barrel, kid. These aliens may have fancy tech, but they've got no street smarts." Jacob nodded, then turned to his small strike team. "All right, people, we're going to flank them. Follow me, and watch your corners." They moved swiftly through the back passages of the facility, the sounds of battle growing louder. As they emerged behind the Vidian position, Jacob gave the signal. "Now!" The aliens found themselves caught in a devastating crossfire between Jacob's flanking team and Bull's main defensive line. The narrow corridors became a killing ground as the Vidians' advanced armor proved little match for the humans' coordinated assault. High above the Earth, Colonel Alexei Volkov watched with a mixture of triumph and frustration as his team successfully disabled the self-destruct mechanisms on 2 of the 3 targeted Vidian vessels. The third ship, however, proved to be a tougher nut to crack. "Sir," his second-in-command reported, "we can't bypass this one's security protocols. It's set to blow in 3 minutes." Volkov's mind raced through the possibilities before coming to a decision. "Everyone out. Grab whatever data and tech you can carry. Move." His team scrambled to extract as much valuable information as possible before evacuating the doomed vessel. As they retreated to a safe distance, the ship detonated in a brilliant flash of light and energy. The resulting electromagnetic pulse rippled through low Earth orbit, temporarily disrupting satellite communications and complicating the ongoing space battle. Captain Marcus Maverick Sterling felt his fighter shudder as the EMP washed over it. "All wings, report in," he called out, his hands dancing over the controls to reboot key systems. "Bandit on your 6, Maverick," his wingman shouted. Sterling's instincts took over. He cut his engines and used the fighter's maneuvering thrusters to flip end over end, bringing his weapons to bear on the pursuing Vidian craft. A short burst from his pulse cannons turned the alien ship into expanding debris. "Thanks for the heads up, Goose," Sterling said, already scanning for his next target. The space around Earth had become a swirling melee of human and Vidian fighters, punctuated by the flashes of larger capital ships exchanging fire. Sterling's eyes narrowed as he spotted the Vidian flagship attempting to retreat to a higher orbit. "All wings, form up on me. We're taking the fight to them." His squadron fell into formation behind him as they streaked towards the massive alien vessel. Sterling led them in a series of complex maneuvers, using debris fields and the planet's gravity to outmaneuver the Vidian defenders. "Hit them with everything you've got," Sterling ordered as they made their attack run. The human fighters unleashed a barrage of missiles and energy weapons, tearing into the flagship's propulsion systems. Explosions blossomed along the alien ship's hull as it limped away from the battle. On the ground, Admiral Helena Frost's command center erupted into chaos as alarms blared. A massive chunk of debris from the destroyed Vidian ship, easily the size of an aircraft carrier, was on a collision course with the eastern seaboard of the United States. "Status of the Global Missile Defense Network?" Frost demanded, her voice cutting through the panic. "Online and ready, Admiral," a technician reported. "But this fragment is too large for conventional interceptors." Frost's mind raced through the possibilities. "Redirect all available orbital defense platforms. We'll hit it with everything we've got." As the command was given, dozens of ground-based interceptor missiles streaked into the sky, their contrails forming a web across the horizon. Simultaneously, orbital defense platforms adjusted their aim, bringing their powerful energy weapons to bear on the approaching threat. The combined firepower struck the massive debris chunk, breaking it apart in a spectacular display of pyrotechnics. However, Frost's relief was short-lived as she realized that while the immediate danger had passed, countless smaller fragments still posed a significant threat to populated areas. It was at this moment that Dr. Samantha Webb, sister of Dr. Alan Webb, and lead scientist at the Atmospheric Manipulation Research Facility in Colorado, made her move. "Admiral Frost," she said, her voice steady despite the urgency of the situation, "we have a way to mitigate the remaining debris." Frost's eyebrows raised. "I'm listening, Doctor." "We've developed an experimental weather control system," Dr. Webb explained quickly. "We can create localized high-pressure systems to alter the trajectory of the smaller fragments, guiding them towards less populated areas or bodies of water." Frost didn't hesitate. "Do it." As Dr. Webb's team activated their cutting-edge technology, the skies above North America began to shift and change. Fragments that would have struck major cities were subtly nudged off course, splashing harmlessly into the Atlantic or coming down in uninhabited forest regions. Back at the Arctic Vidian base, Major Hawkins and her team finally reached the control center. They burst through the doors, weapons at the ready, only to be met with a hail of alien weapons fire. "Take cover," Hawkins shouted, diving behind a console as energy bolts sizzled past her head. The remaining Vidian defenders fought with the desperation of those who knew they had nowhere left to retreat. In the chaos of the firefight, a stray shot struck the energy weapons control console. Sparks flew as systems overloaded, and a deep, ominous hum began to fill the air. "Major," Corporal Rodriguez called out, his eyes wide as he scanned the readouts on his tactical display. "The weapon's powering up on its own. It's going to fire." Hawkins felt her blood run cold as she realized the implications. If the weapon fired randomly, it could potentially destroy Earth's crust, rendering all their efforts meaningless. "Options?" she demanded, her mind racing. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before it reaches critical mass," Rodriguez reported. "We either shut it down or get the hell out of here." Hawkins gritted her teeth, weighing their rapidly dwindling options. The fate of the entire planet now rested on the decisions she would make in the next few moments. As the energy weapons hum grew louder and the Vidian defenders pressed their attack, Major Hawkins steeled herself for what promised to be the most crucial battle of her life. Career. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, but the Major knew that wasn't an option. If they failed here, Earth would pay the ultimate price. "Drake," Hawkins shouted over the din of battle. "I need you on that console. Everyone else, defensive positions." Corporal Ethan Drake nodded grimly, his fingers already flying over his advanced hacking device as he sprinted towards the alien control panel. The rest of the team fanned out, creating a protective perimeter around their tech specialist. As Drake worked furiously to decipher the alien code, the room shook violently. The weapon's power output was increasing rapidly, sending tremors through the Arctic base. "Status, Drake," Hawkins called out, her rifle trained on the entrance. "It's like nothing I've ever seen, Major," Drake replied, his voice strained with concentration. "But I'm making progress. Just need a few more minutes." Those minutes felt like hours as wave after wave of Vidian reinforcements attempted to retake the control center. Hawkins and her team engaged in brutal close-quarters combat, their human ingenuity and adaptability pitted against advanced alien technology. Private Chun went down, a Vidian energy bolt catching him in the shoulder. Corporal Rodriguez dragged him to cover, applying a quick field dressing before rejoining the fight. "Major, we can't hold them off forever," Rodriguez shouted, his rifle clicking empty. He smoothly transitioned to his sidearm, never letting up on the suppressing fire. Hawkins gritted her teeth, her mind racing. They were out of options and nearly out of time. "Drake, tell me you've got something." At the EDF headquarters, Jacob Evans and Dr. Alan Webb finalized their plan to implement the disruptive signal against the Vidian fleet. Jacob's fingers flew over the console as he opened a secure channel to Captain Marcus Sterling. "Sterling, do you copy?" Jacob's voice was tense but controlled. "Loud and clear, Evans," Sterling replied, the sounds of space combat audible in the background. "What's the situation?" "We need you to broadcast a signal," Jacob explained quickly. "It could disable the Vidian fleet, but you'll need to get close to their command ships." There was a moment of silence before Sterling responded. "Copy that. Send me the details. I'll get it done." As Jacob transmitted the necessary information, alarms blared throughout the headquarters. Commander Czar's Vidian commando team had launched their final assault on the inner sanctum. Sergeant Mike Bull Torres stood at the forefront of the last line of defense. His massive frame filled the narrow corridor as he directed the placement of improvised explosive devices. "Hold the line," Torres bellowed, his voice carrying over the chaos. "We give no ground." The defenders had repurposed captured Vidian weapons, turning the aliens' technology against them. As the first wave of commandos rounded the corner, they were met with a devastating barrage of their own energy weapons. The close-quarters battle devolved into a brutal, room-by-room struggle. Human and Vidian forces clashed in hand-to-hand combat, the tight spaces negating much of the aliens' technological advantage. In orbit, Colonel Alexei Volkov supervised the frantic data extraction from the captured Vidian vessels. His team worked with clockwork precision, downloading terabytes of information and securing samples of alien technology. "Sir," his second-in-command called out, "you need to see this." Volkov moved swiftly to the console, his eyes widening as he took in the information on the screen. Before him were detailed blueprints for a massive ring-shaped structure, unlike anything he had ever seen. "Is this what I think it is?" Volkov asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His subordinate nodded. "It appears to be a faster-than-light travel device. Sir, this could change everything." Volkov's mind raced with the implications, but he forced himself to focus on the immediate task. Secure that data. Priority 1. We need to get this back to Earth. As Volkov's team worked to safeguard their revolutionary discovery, Captain Sterling led his squadron on their daring mission. They weaved through the debris-filled orbital space, dodging Vidian fighters and capital ship fire. "All wings form up on me," Sterling ordered. "We've got one shot at this. Let's make it count." His squadron fell into formation behind him as they streaked towards the Vidian command ships. The alien vessels loomed before them, their massive forms dwarfing the human fighters. "Initiating transmission now," Sterling announced as they closed in on their target. "Cover me." The squadron split off, engaging the Vidian defenders in a frenzied dogfight. Sterling's fighter shuddered as he pushed it to its limits, maneuvering closer to the command ship while broadcasting the disruptive signal. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the Vidian ships began to falter. Their weapon systems flickered and died. Propulsion systems sputtered and failed. "It's working," Sterling exclaimed. "All units, press the attack." As the space battle turned in humanity's favor, Dr. Samantha Webb faced a challenge of her own on the ground. Larger debris fragments from the destroyed Vidian ships entered Earth's atmosphere, threatening populated areas across the globe. "Activate Pressure System Alpha through Delta," Webb ordered, her eyes fixed on the holographic display before her. "Create a channel to guide the debris towards the Pacific." Her team worked feverishly, manipulating the experimental weather control system to its limits. High-pressure systems formed in the atmosphere, invisible hands guiding the falling debris away from cities and towards open water. Fragment cluster approaching eastern seaboard. A technician called out. Too large to redirect fully. Webb's mind raced through calculations. "Initiate pressure system Epsilon. We'll split the cluster, half to the Atlantic, half to the Great Lakes." As Webb's team battled to protect the planet's surface, Admiral Helena Frost received alarming news at her command center. "Admiral," a communications officer reported, "deep space monitoring stations have detected the Vidian reserve fleet." It's massive, sir." Frost's expression hardened as she took in the tactical display. The approaching Vidian armada dwarfed their initial invasion force. Earth's defenses, already strained to the breaking point, would not be able to repel this new threat. "Initiate Protocol Omega," Frost ordered, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Activate the Asteroid Belt Defense Network." As her staff scrambled to carry out her orders, Frost allowed herself a moment of silent reflection. The experimental gravitational pulse weapons were a last resort, their effects potentially catastrophic. But faced with the annihilation of humanity, there was no choice left to make. Across every front of the battle, humanity's defenders fought with desperate willpower. In the Arctic, Drake raced against time to shut down the Vidian weapon. In orbit, Sterling's squadron pressed their advantage against the disabled alien fleet. At the EGF headquarters, Taurus and his team held the line against Zar's relentless assault. And in the depths of space, the asteroid belt came alive with hidden power as Earth activated its final, untested defense. The next few moments would determine not just the outcome of the battle, but the very future of humanity. Humanity, as the gravitational pulse weapons activated, the battle for Earth entered its most critical phase. At the Arctic Vidian base, Corporal Ethan Drake's fingers flew across the alien console, his brow furrowed in concentration. The weapon's hum had reached a fever pitch, vibrating through the floor and walls of the control room. "I've got it," Drake shouted, his voice barely audible over the din. "Major, I can't shut it down, but I can redirect the energy." Hawkins ducked as a Vidian energy bolt sizzled past her head. "Do it, Drake. Whatever it takes." Drake's fingers danced across the alien interface, reprogramming the weapon to fire its concentrated beam into space. The tremors intensified, and chunks of ice began to fall from the ceiling. "It's done," Drake yelled, "but this place is coming down around us." Hawkins didn't hesitate. "All units, fall back. We're getting out of here." The team fought their way through the collapsing corridors, engaging in frantic close-quarters combat with the remaining Vidian defenders. Private Chun, despite his wounded shoulder, provided covering fire as they retreated. As they emerged from the base, A blinding pillar of light erupted from the weapon's muzzle, shooting straight up into the sky. The ground beneath their feet buckled and cracked. "Move, move, move," Hawkins ordered, leading her team across the fracturing ice field towards their extraction point. In orbit, Captain Marcus Sterling's squadron weaved through a maelstrom of debris and enemy fire. His flagship shuddered as another Vidian blast struck its hull. "Shields at 15%, Captain," his second-in-command reported. "We can't take much more of this." Sterling's teeth clenched as he assessed their options. They were so close to the Vidian command ships, but at this rate, they'd never make it. "All hands, prepare to abandon ship," Sterling ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. "Transfer the signal device to my personal craft." As his crew scrambled to evacuate, Sterling plotted a collision course with the largest Vidian vessel. He transferred to a smaller, more agile ship, watching as his flagship streaked towards its target, trailing fire and debris. "All wings form up on me," Sterling commanded. "We're going to ride the shockwave in." The flagship slammed into the Vidian command ship, erupting in a massive explosion. Sterling and his remaining pilots used the blast as cover, streaking through the Vidian defenses. Initiating broadcast. "Now," Sterling announced as they reached optimal range. The effect was almost immediate. Vidian ships began to drift, their weapons falling silent and their engines sputtering out. At the EDF headquarters, the situation had become dire. Sergeant Taurus and his team were pushed back to their final defensive position, the sounds of Vidian weapons fire growing ever closer. Jacob Evans turned to Dr. Alan Webb, his expression grim. "We're out of options. We need to release Captain Zara." Webb's eyes widened. "That's insane. She could dash." "It's our only chance," Evans interrupted. He keyed in the release code for Zara's containment cell. As the blast doors opened, Zara emerged, her alien features impassive. The sounds of battle intensified, and suddenly Commander Zar and his Vidian commandos burst into the room. For a moment, everything froze. Zar stared at Zara, his weapon wavering. "Commander," Zara said, her voice cold and authoritative. "Secure this facility. Capture the humans." Zar hesitated for a split second, then nodded. "Yes, Captain." Evans and Webb exchanged a panicked look before sprinting deeper into the facility. They needed to reach the secure data vaults before the Vidians could access Earth's most vital secrets. In low Earth orbit, Colonel Volkov watched as his team's improvised plan unfolded. The captured Vidian ships, now flying on autopilot, approached the incoming reserve fleet. Detonation in 3, 2, 1. His second-in-command counted down. The rigged engines of the decoy ships exploded, creating a massive, expanding ball of superheated plasma and debris. Several Vidian ships were caught in the blast, while others swerved to avoid collision, breaking their formation. Back on the ground, Dr. Samantha Webb's team worked feverishly to control the cascade of debris entering Earth's atmosphere. Holographic displays filled the air around them, tracking thousands of fragments. "Pressure system Gamma is failing," one of her technicians called out. "We can't hold the Pacific Corridor." Webb's mind raced. "Divert power from systems Alpha and Beta. We need to split that debris cluster." As they fought to control the falling fragments, the sky lit up with streaks of fire. Despite their best efforts, some debris was going to make it through. In her command center, Admiral Frost watched as Protocol Omega unfolded. The asteroid belt defense network came to life, unleashing a barrage of gravitational pulses at the Vidian reserve fleet. Space itself seemed to ripple as the pulses struck their targets. Vidian ships collided with each other, their formation thrown into chaos. But as Frost observed the effects, a new alarm blared. "Admiral," a scientist called out, his voice shaking. "The gravitational waves. They're propagating through the system. We're detecting orbital anomalies." Frost's blood ran cold as she realized the implications. In their desperation to save Earth, they might have set in motion events that could reshape the entire solar system. As battles raged in space, on the ground, and in the upper atmosphere, Earth's defenders fought with everything they had. But with each passing moment, it became clear that the war for humanity's survival was far from finished, and its outcome remained uncertain. Uncertain. The gravitational pulses from Admiral Frost's Protocol Omega tore through space, their effects rippling far beyond their intended targets. As the Vidian Reserve Fleet fell into disarray, a new threat emerged, one of humanity's own making. Frost's eyes widened as she processed the incoming data. What's happening to our orbital trajectory? The scientist's voice trembled. The gravitational waves are affecting Earth's orbit, Admiral. We're detecting significant perturbations in our planetary motion, and the moon's orbit is shifting as well. Before Frost could respond, the command center shook violently. Alarms blared as reports flooded in from across the globe. Earthquakes rocked major cities. Tsunamis formed off coastlines, and violent storms began to brew in once calm skies. In her weather control center, Dr. Samantha Webb fought to maintain control of the situation. Her team worked feverishly, their hands flying across holographic interfaces as they attempted to mitigate the cascading environmental disasters. Divert all available power to the Pacific's seismic stabilizers. Webb shouted over the chaos. We need to prevent that tsunami from hitting the West Coast. As her team struggled to contain one crisis after another, Webb noticed a worrying pattern in the system's performance metrics. The strain of combating multiple global-scale disasters was pushing the weather control network to its limits. Dr. Webb, a technician called out, panic evident in his voice. System overload imminent in sectors 3 through 7. Webb gritted her teeth, her mind racing for solutions. They were preventing major catastrophes, but at a cost. If the system failed completely, the consequences would be unthinkable. In the Arctic, Major Sarah Hawkins and her team stumbled across the fracturing ice, the sounds of cracking and groaning surrounding them. The reprogrammed Vidian weapon had fired its beam into space, but the aftermath was not nearly finished. Suddenly, the sky above them erupted in a dazzling, terrifying display of light and energy. The beam had intersected with the gravitational waves from Protocol Omega, creating a massive electromagnetic storm in the upper atmosphere. Major, Private Chin shouted, pointing at their communication devices. The screens flickered and died, leaving them in eerie silence. Hawkins surveyed her team, their faces illuminated by the pulsing lights above. Looks like we're on our own, people. Let's move. We need to reach the extraction point before this ice becomes the Arctic Ocean. In orbit, Captain Marcus Sterling's eyes widened as his ship's controls went haywire. The electromagnetic interference scrambled his systems, sending his vessel veering off its intended collision course with the Vidian command ship. No! Sterling shouted, fighting with the unresponsive controls. His ship careened through space, narrowly missing its target but slamming into a smaller Vidian vessel. The impact detonated the disruptive signal device prematurely. A wave of energy pulsed outward, disabling several nearby Vidian ships, but falling far short of affecting the entire fleet as intended. As Sterling's crippled ship spun through the debris field, he watched in dismay as the majority of the Vidian fleet remained operational. This isn't over, he muttered, reaching for the emergency controls to stabilize his craft. Back at the EDF headquarters, Jacob Evans and Dr. Alan Webb raced through the corridors, the sounds of Vidian weapons fire echoing behind them. They burst into a research lab, quickly barricading the door. We need to take out their tech advantage, Evans said, scanning the room for useful components. Any ideas? Webb's eyes lit up. An EMP device. If we can cobble one together, we might be able to level the playing field. As they worked frantically to assemble the makeshift weapon, the door to the lab burst open, Evans reached for his sidearm, but froze when he saw the figure standing in the doorway. Lieutenant Kira Yoshida stood before them, her dark hair matted with sweat and grime, a sleek prototype weapon cradled in her arms. "Looks like you could use some help," she said, a grim smile on her face. Evans and Webb exchanged glances before nodding. Yoshida joined them, placing the plasma rifle on the workbench. "Reverse engineered from Vidian Tech," she explained. "It might give us an edge." As they worked to complete the EMP device, the building shook from the ongoing battle. They could hear Zara's cold, commanding voice echoing through the halls, directing the Vidian forces closer to their position. In orbit, Colonel Alexei Volkov clung to his seat as the captured Vidian vessel groaned and shuddered around him. The gravitational disturbances from Protocol Omega were taking their toll on the ship's structural integrity. "Status report," Volkov barked, his eyes fixed on the rapidly approaching Earth. His second-in-command's voice was strained. "Hull integrity at 62% and dropping. Sir, at this rate, we won't survive re-entry." Volkov's mind raced. The alien data and technology they recovered could change the course of the war, if they could get it to Earth intact. "Reroute all non-essential power to the structural integrity field," he ordered, "and plot a course for the Pacific Ocean. We're going to splash down." As Volkov's team fought to keep their ship together, the Vidian Reserve Fleet began to regroup. On the bridge of his massive flagship, Grand Admiral Zeltheros surveyed the chaos with cold, calculating eyes. "Deploy the atmospheric strike force," Zeltheros commanded, his voice a low, menacing growl. "Target their population centers. The rest of the fleet will eliminate what's left of their orbital defenses." Vidian ships peeled away from the main fleet, descending towards Earth's atmosphere. As they entered the turbulent layer of air, however, their advanced systems began to falter. The electromagnetic storm created by the Arctic weapons' interaction with the gravitational waves played havoc with their targeting systems and shields. On the ground, General Victor Ramirez of the United Earth Defense Force watched the Vidian ship's erratic descent on his command screens. A fierce grin spread across his face as he recognized the opportunity. "All units," this is General Ramirez, he broadcast to Earth's remaining conventional forces. "The enemy is vulnerable. Engage with everything we've got, missiles, fighters, whatever you can throw at them. Let's show these aliens what humanity can do." As Earth's military forces sprang into action, the battle entered a new phase. Humanity's defenders fought with renewed vigor, seizing upon the unexpected advantages while grappling with the unintended consequences of their own desperate measures. The fate of the planet hung in the balance, with the actions of a few key individuals poised to turn the tide of the conflict. Invasion, the electromagnetic storm born from the collision of the Arctic weapons' energy and the gravitational waves spread across the globe, throwing both human and Vidian forces into disarray. In the skies above Earth's major cities, the Vidian ship's erratic descent continued. General Victor Ramirez watched the alien vessels lurch and sway on his command screens, a fierce grin spreading across his face as he recognized the opportunity presented by their compromised systems. "All fighter squadrons, this is General Ramirez," he broadcast, his voice crackling with static. "The enemy's blind. Engage at will. Show them what Earth's pilots can do." Across the globe, hangars burst open as Earth's remaining fighter jets and bombers took to the skies. Pilots strapped themselves into their cockpits, adrenaline pumping through their veins as they prepared to face the alien threat. Captain Maria Chun, leader of the 87th Fighter Squadron, gunned her engines as she climbed into the turbulent skies over San Francisco. Through her canopy, she could see the hulking shapes of Vidian ships, their usually graceful forms now jerking and weaving unpredictably. "All right, Raptors," Chin called out to her squadron. "Those bastards can't see us coming. Let's make every shot count." The squadron of Earth fighters swooped in low, hugging the contours of the city's hills and bay. As they approached the nearest Vidian vessel, Chen's targeting computer flickered and died, victim to the electromagnetic interference. "Damn it," she muttered, then keyed her mic. "Raptors, our tech's as dead as theirs. We're going old school. Visual targeting only." Chun lined up her shot by eye, judging distance and speed as her fighter screamed towards the alien ship. At the last moment, she squeezed the trigger. A barrage of missiles streaked from her wings, slamming into the Vidian vessel's hull. Explosions blossomed across its surface as Chin pulled up sharply, skimming over the top of the wounded ship. Similar scenes played out across the globe as Earth's pilots, relying on skill and instinct, pressed their advantage against the disoriented Vidian fleet. Meanwhile, at the EDF headquarters, Jacob Evans, Dr. Alan Webb, and Lieutenant Kira Yoshida worked feverishly to complete their makeshift EMP device. The sounds of Vidian weapons fire grew closer, punctuated by the cold commands of Captain Zara. "Almost there," Webb muttered, making a final adjustment to the device. Evans nodded grimly. "It's now or never. Kira, are you ready?" Yoshida hefted the prototype plasma rifle, checking its charge. "Ready as I'll ever be." "Then let's do this," Evans said, activating the EMP device. A wave of energy pulsed outward, and for a moment, everything electronic in the building went dead. The lights flickered out, plunging the corridors into darkness. The constant hum of machinery fell silent, replaced by confused shouts from both humans and Vidians. Evans, Webb, and Yoshida burst from the lab, Yoshida leading with her still-functioning plasma rifle. They encountered a group of disoriented Vidian soldiers, their advanced weapons now useless in their hands. Yoshida opened fire, blue-white energy bolts sizzling through the air. 2 Vidians fell before they could react. Evans and Webb followed up, wielding improvised weapons cobbled together from lab equipment. Evans swung a metal pipe, catching a Vidian across the chest and sending it sprawling. Webb lobbed a beaker full of caustic chemicals, the mixture splattering across an alien's face and eliciting a howl of pain. As they fought their way through the corridors, more EDF personnel joined them, arming themselves with whatever they could find. The tide began to turn as the humans, accustomed to operating without advanced technology, pressed their advantage against the floundering Vidians. In orbit, Colonel Alexei Volkov's captured Vidian vessel shuddered and groaned as it began its descent into Earth's atmosphere. Warning klaxons blared throughout the ship as the hull temperature rose rapidly. Structural integrity at 47% and falling. Volkov, second-in-command, shouted over the noise. "We're breaking up." Volkov gripped the alien controls, his knuckles tightening with effort. The ship bucked and weaved as it plummeted through the atmosphere, buffeted by the gravitational anomalies caused by Protocol Omega. "Reroute all remaining power to the ventral heat shields." Volkov ordered, his eyes fixed on the rapidly approaching Pacific Ocean. "And someone find me a working comm system. We need to alert the Navy for pickup." As Volkov fought to land his crippled ship, the battle for Earth raged on multiple fronts. In the Arctic, Major Sarah Hawkins and her team from Operation Icepick trudged across the fracturing ice, drawn towards a startling discovery revealed by the weapon they had fired into space. "Major," Private Chin called out, pointing ahead. "Look!" Through the swirling snow and ice, a structure was visible, clearly alien in origin, its smooth, dark surface a stark contrast to the white landscape around it. The reprogrammed Vidian weapon had melted away centuries of ice, exposing something that had long lain hidden beneath Earth's surface. Hawkins stared at the structure, her mind racing. "Chun Rodriguez with me. The rest of you, secure a perimeter. We're going to take a closer look." As Hawkins and her team cautiously approached the alien edifice, they were unaware of the new threat descending from orbit. Grand Admiral Zeltheros, frustrated by the unexpected complications in his invasion plan, had unleashed his secret weapon. A massive drop pod streaked through Earth's atmosphere, its hull glowing red-hot from the friction of re-entry. Inside, The cybernetically enhanced Vidian warrior cracks prepared for battle, his advanced systems mostly shielded from the electromagnetic interference that plagued the rest of the Vidian forces. As the pod hurtled towards its target, a major human military command center in North America, General Ramirez received the alert from one of Earth's few remaining functional radar stations. "Sir," a technician called out, "we've detected a single, large object entering the atmosphere. Trajectory indicates it's heading for Colorado Springs." Ramirez's blood ran cold as he realized the implications. The North American Aerospace Defense Command was located there, buried deep within Cheyenne Mountain. If the Vidians managed to take out that facility, Earth's defensive capabilities would be crippled. "Divert the 44th Fighter Wing to intercept," Ramirez ordered, knowing full well that he was pulling vital air support from other battlefronts. "And get me a secure line to NORAD. We need to prepare for a ground assault." As Ramirez scrambled to mount a defense against this new threat, the electromagnetic storm began to dissipate. Slowly, communication systems around the globe crackled back to life, allowing Earth's scattered forces to re-establish contact and coordinate their efforts. Admiral Helena Frost, finally able to communicate with her subordinates, received a flood of reports from across the planet. The discoveries in the Arctic, the desperate measures at the weather control facility, the incoming Vidian superweapon. Each new piece of information painted a picture of a battle that was just getting started. Amidst the torrent of data, one transmission caught Frost's attention. It was from Jacob Evans, and it contained detailed information about Vidian military strategies and weaknesses, gleaned from the captured Captain Zara. Frost's eyes widened as she processed the intelligence. With this information, they might have a chance to turn the tide of the battle. But as she prepared to issue new orders to her forces, another alert caught her attention. On her main view screen, a live feed showed Earth's moon, its familiar face now marred by visible distortions in its orbit. The gravitational disturbances caused by Protocol Omega were having far-reaching effects, and the potential long-term consequences for Earth were yet to be determined. As Frost contemplated this new development, the battle for Earth entered a new phase. Both sides struggled to adapt to the rapidly changing conditions, with the actions of key individuals continuing to shape the course of the conflict. The fate of the planet hung in the balance, with the potential for further surprises and challenges looming on the horizon. As Frost contemplated this new development, the battle for Earth entered a new phase. The electromagnetic storm that had wreaked havoc on both human and Vidian systems began to dissipate, allowing communication capabilities to slowly return. Admiral Helena Frost's command center buzzed with activity as reports flooded in from across the globe. Amidst the torrent of information, a transmission from Jacob Evans caught her attention. It contained detailed intelligence about Vidian military strategies and weaknesses, gleaned from the captured Captain Zara. Frost's eyes widened as she processed the data. "This changes everything," she muttered, her mind already formulating new strategies. Before she could act on this intelligence, another alert demanded her attention. A technician called out, "Admiral, we're tracking a large object entering Earth's atmosphere. It's on a direct course for Colorado Springs." Frost's blood ran cold as she realized the implications. "NORAD," she breathed. "If the Vidians took out that facility, Earth's defensive capabilities would be crippled." She keyed her comm system. "General Ramirez, are you seeing this?" "Affirmative, Admiral." Ramirez's voice crackled through the speaker. "I'm diverting the 44th Fighter Wing to intercept." Frost nodded grimly. "Understood. We'll coordinate from here to provide any support we can." As Ramirez's fighters raced to intercept the incoming threat, Frost turned her attention back to the intelligence from Evans. She began issuing rapid-fire orders to her staff, coordinating a new offensive strategy that would exploit the weaknesses in the Vidian fleet's formation and shield systems. Meanwhile, in the skies above Colorado, the pilots of the 44th Fighter Wing pushed their aircraft to the limit. Major Lisa Viper Chun, leader of the squadron, spotted the massive drop pod streaking through the atmosphere. "All units, this is Viper," she called out over the comm. "Target acquired. Weapons free. Take that thing down before it reaches the ground." The fighters unleashed a barrage of missiles, but the pod's advanced defenses proved formidable. Energy shields flickered to life, deflecting or absorbing most of the incoming fire. Inside the pod, the cybernetically enhanced Vidian warrior Krax prepared for battle. His advanced systems, largely shielded from the electromagnetic interference, allowed him to monitor the humans' attempts to stop him. A cruel smile played across his alien features as he activated the pod's counterattack measures. Suddenly, the pod began firing back. Viper's squadron scattered as energy beams lanced out from the descending object, slicing through the air with deadly precision. "Evasive maneuvers," Viper shouted, rolling her fighter to avoid a direct hit. "Anderson, Cruz, flank it from the sides. We need to find a weak spot in its defenses." As the aerial battle raged, the pod continued its inexorable descent towards NORAD. On the ground, General Ramirez coordinated the facility's defenses, knowing that if the pod reached its target, the consequences would be catastrophic. In the Arctic, Major Sarah Hawkins and her team from Operation Icepick approached the alien structure revealed by the energy beam. The smooth, dark surface stood in stark contrast to the white landscape surrounding it. "Chun Rodriguez with me," Hawkins ordered. "The rest of you, secure a perimeter. We're going in." As they entered the structure, their flashlights illuminated strange, alien architecture. The air inside was surprisingly warm, and a faint hum permeated the atmosphere. "What is this place?" Rodriguez whispered, his voice filled with awe and trepidation. Hawkins shook her head. "I don't know, but it's clear this isn't new. This has been here for a long time." They moved deeper into the facility, their boots echoing on the metallic floor. Suddenly, Chin called out, "Major, over here." Hawkins rushed to Chen's position, where he stood in front of a bank of alien computers. Strange symbols flickered across the screens, pulsing with an eerie light. "Can you make anything of it?" Hawkins asked, studying the unfamiliar technology. Chun, the team's tech expert, shook his head. "Not yet, but..." "Wait." He pointed to a small slot in the console. "I think these might be some kind of data storage devices." Hawkins nodded. "Collect as many as you can. We need to get this back to our scientists for analysis." As they gathered the alien data crystals, none of them realized the true significance of their discovery. The information contained within those crystals would reveal centuries of Vidian plans for Earth, including details about hidden bases and sleeper agents placed around the globe. Back at the EDF headquarters, Jacob Evans, Dr. Alan Webb, and Lieutenant Kira Yoshida pressed their advantage against the Vidian forces. With most of the alien technology rendered useless by the EMP, the humans fought their way through the corridors, pushing the invaders back. Captain Zara, her usual cool demeanor cracking under the pressure, barked orders to her troops as they retreated to the facility's main control room. "Hold this position. We cannot allow the humans to take control of this facility." Evans, Webb, and Yoshida approached the sealed doors of the control room, plasma rifle at the ready. They could hear the frantic movements of the Vidians inside, preparing for a last stand. "Any ideas?" Evans asked, looking at his companions. Webb's eyes lit up. "The ventilation system. If we can introduce a non-lethal gas through the air ducts, we might be able to incapacitate them without a firefight." Yoshida nodded. "I know where we can get what we need. Cover me." As Yoshida darted off to gather the necessary supplies, Evans and Webb prepared for their final push. The fate of the EDF headquarters and potentially the entire war effort hung in the balance as they readied themselves for the confrontation with Captain Zara and her remaining forces. As Evans and Webb prepared for their final push, A crackling voice came through their comms. "This is Admiral Frost. Operation Slingshot is now in effect. All Earth Defense Force personnel, stand by for updates." Evans and Webb exchanged glances, knowing that the tide of the battle could soon shift. But they had no time to dwell on it. Their immediate concern was the control room before them. In orbit, Admiral Helena Frost coordinated the deployment of Earth's most advanced spacecraft. The small fleet of human vessels used the moon's gravitational field to accelerate rapidly, aiming directly for the heart of the Vidian formation. The daring maneuver caught the alien forces off guard, creating momentary chaos in their ranks. On the bridge of the EDF flagship, Frost watched the holographic display as the human ships closed in on their targets. "Status report," she ordered, her voice tense but controlled. "Our ships are holding formation, Admiral," her tactical officer responded. "The Vidians are scrambling to reposition their defenses." Frost nodded, her eyes never leaving the display. "Press the advantage. All ships, concentrate fire on their command vessels." As the space battle unfolded, a new threat emerged on the ground. The massive drop pod that had streaked through the atmosphere crash-landed near the North American Military Command Center. The impact shook the Earth, sending tremors through the facility's reinforced walls. Inside the command center, General Victor Ramirez felt the vibration and knew their time had run out. "Seal all entrances," he barked. "I want every available unit at the ready." The general's orders were barely carried out when the facility's outer defenses came under attack. Security feeds showed a nightmarish sight: a massive, cybernetically enhanced Vidian warrior emerging from the smoking wreckage of the drop pod. Ramirez's face hardened as he watched the creature tear through the first line of defense with terrifying ease. "Activate the Titan project," he commanded, his voice grim. Deep within the facility, a series of heavy blast doors slid open, revealing a row of imposing mechanical suits. These were the experimental-powered armor suits, designed to enhance human strength and durability. Ramirez strode towards one, willpower etched on his face. "Sir," one of his aides protested, "those haven't been fully tested yet." "We're out of options, soldier," Ramirez replied, stepping into the suit. As the armor sealed around him, he felt a surge of power coursing through his body. It's time to level the playing field. Meanwhile, in the Sahara Desert, Colonel Alexei Volkov and his team worked feverishly to secure the valuable alien data and technology from their crashed Vidian vessel. As they loaded the last of the equipment onto their transport, a voice called out from the swirling sand. "Hello there. You look like you could use some help." Volkov spun around, weapon at the ready, only to find himself face to face with a man in dust-covered research gear. The stranger raised his hands, showing he was unarmed. "I'm Dr. Muhammad Amir," he said, his voice carrying a hint of excitement despite the dire circumstances. "I'm a xenobiologist. I was conducting research at a nearby oasis when I saw your ship go down." Volkov lowered his weapon slightly, but remained wary. "What are you doing out here, Doctor?" Amir's eyes lit up as he glanced at the alien technology. "I've spent my career studying extraterrestrial biology. If that's Vidian tech, I might be able to help you decode it. Time is of the essence, isn't it?" After a moment's hesitation, Volkov nodded. "All right, Doctor, but if you try anything—" "You have my word," Amir said solemnly. "Earth is my home, too. I want to help." As Amir joined the team, Volkov couldn't shake the feeling that this unexpected encounter might just turn the tide of the battle. Back at the EDF headquarters, Jacob Evans, Dr. Alan Webb, and Lieutenant Kira Yoshida had reached a critical juncture in their standoff with Captain Zara's forces. Yoshida, her fingers flying over a control panel, muttered a string of commands under her breath. "Almost there," she said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Just need to bypass one more firewall." Suddenly, The heavy doors of the control room slid open with a hiss. Evans and Webb wasted no time, charging into the room with weapons raised. The Vidian troops, caught off guard by the sudden breach, scrambled for cover. Captain Zara's voice rang out above the chaos. "Hold your positions. Do not let them take this room." The air filled with the sound of plasma fire as both sides exchanged volleys. Evans ducked behind a console, narrowly avoiding a bolt of energy that left a scorch mark on the wall behind him. "Webb," he shouted over the noise. "Can you access their systems from here?" The scientist nodded, his fingers already dancing across the nearest terminal. "Working on it. If I can just—" His words were cut short as a Vidian soldier lunged at him, energy blade humming to life. Webb barely managed to dodge, the blade slicing through the air where his head had been moments before. Evans reacted instantly, tackling the alien to the ground. The two grappled fiercely, each fighting for control of the energy blade. With a grunt of effort, Evans managed to wrench the weapon free, driving it into the Vidian's chest. As the fight raged on, none of the combatants realized that their actions were about to trigger a chain of events that would reshape the course of the entire invasion. The fate of Earth hung in the balance, with victory or defeat hinging on the outcome of these crucial battles unfolding across the globe and beyond. In space and beyond, as Evans and his team pushed forward, a blinding flash illuminated the sky above, drawing their attention momentarily from the battle at hand. In Earth's orbit, Admiral Helena Frost stood on the bridge of her flagship, her eyes fixed on the holographic display before her. "Project Sunburst is online," she announced, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "All stations, prepare for full deployment." The massive solar-powered laser array hidden in Earth's orbit hummed to life, its energy collectors gleaming in the sunlight. Frost's fingers danced across the control panel, coordinating with the remaining orbital defense stations. "Target the incoming swarm," she ordered. "Fire at will." Beams of concentrated energy lanced out across the void, striking the first wave of Vidian drone ships approaching from Jupiter. The destructive power of Project Sunburst was immediately apparent as dozens of the automated vessels erupted into balls of superheated plasma. "Direct hit on multiple targets," reported the tactical officer. "Enemy casualties rising rapidly." Frost allowed herself a small smile, but it faded quickly as she observed the tactical display. Despite the devastating effectiveness of Project Sunburst, the sheer number of incoming drones seemed endless. For every ship they destroyed, 10 more appeared to take its place. "Keep firing," she commanded. "We need to thin their numbers as much as possible before they reach Earth's atmosphere." On the ground, the situation was equally dire. The massive drop pod that had crashed near the North American Military Command Center had disgorged its nightmarish cargo. Cracks, the cybernetically enhanced Vidian warrior, tore through the facility's outer defenses with terrifying ease. Inside the command center, General Victor Ramirez felt the vibrations of the aliens' approach through the reinforced walls. He stood before the row of experimental-powered armor suits, his teeth gritted with perseverance. "Sir, the Titan project hasn't been fully tested," warned one of his aides. Ramirez turned to face the soldier, his eyes blazing with grit. "We're out of options. Sometimes you have to roll the dice." With practiced efficiency, Ramirez stepped into the suit. As the armor sealed around him, he felt a surge of power coursing through his body. Servos whirred and hydraulics hissed as he flexed his newly enhanced muscles. "All personnel, fall back to secondary positions," he ordered through the suit's communication system. "I'll handle our uninvited guest." The general strode towards the main entrance, each step leaving small indentations in the reinforced floor. As the blast doors slid open, he came face to face with Krax. The Vidian towered over him, its alien features twisted into a grotesque smile. "Ah, a challenge at last," Krax growled, his voice a metallic rasp. Ramirez didn't waste time with words. He charged forward, the suit's enhanced strength propelling him at incredible speed. His armored fist connected with Krax's midsection, the impact sending shockwaves through the air. The Vidian staggered back, momentarily surprised by the force of the blow. But its cybernetic enhancements quickly compensated, and it retaliated with a flurry of strikes that would have pulverized an unarmored human. Ramirez's suit absorbed most of the impact, but warning lights flashed across his heads-up display. He knew he couldn't sustain this level of punishment for long. The two titans clashed amid the ruins of the command center's outer perimeter, their battle causing massive collateral damage. Concrete crumbled and steel beams twisted as they traded blows, each seeking to gain the upper hand. As the fight raged on, Ramirez felt the strain on his body despite the suit's protection. Krax seemed to possess limitless endurance, its cybernetic enhancements constantly adapting to the general's tactics. "You fight well, for a human," Krax taunted, deflecting a powerful punch from Ramirez. "But your primitive technology is no match for Vidian engineering." Ramirez gritted his teeth, ignoring the alien's words. He knew that every second he kept Krax occupied was another second bought for the defenders inside the command center. But as the battle wore on, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was merely delaying the inevitable. Thousands of miles away, in the scorching heat of the Sahara Desert, Colonel Alexei Volkov and Dr. Muhammad Amir hunched over the alien technology salvaged from the crashed Vidian vessel. Sweat beaded on their foreheads as they worked feverishly to decode the complex systems. "This is incredible," Amir muttered, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and horror. "The level of technological advancement. It's beyond anything I've ever seen." Volkov grunted in agreement, his focus unwavering as he sifted through the alien data. Suddenly, a series of symbols on the screen caught his attention. "Doctor, look at this. Does this mean what I think it means?" Amir leaned in, his breath catching in his throat as he deciphered the information. "My God! It's a plan for a planet-wide energy shield. If they deploy this, Earth will be cut off completely," Volkov finished, his voice grim. "We need to warn Admiral Frost immediately." As Volkov scrambled to establish a secure communication link with the Orbital Command, Amir continued to delve deeper into the Vidian plans. The more he uncovered, the more he realized the true scale of the invasion they faced. In orbit, Captain Marcus Maverick, Sterling, and Subcommander Lyra worked in tense silence aboard the disabled Vidian vessel. Sterling's hands flew across the alien controls, guided by Lyra's instructions. "Reroute the power from the auxiliary systems," Lyra said, her voice strained. "We need to bring the weapons online without alerting the main Vidian fleet." Sterling nodded, sweat dripping from his brow as he focused on the task at hand. Suddenly, the ship's systems hummed to life, holographic displays flickering into existence around them. "We did it," Sterling breathed, a grin spreading across his face. "Now, let's put this firepower to good use." Without hesitation, he targeted the nearest Vidian orbital satellite, one of many amplifying the alien fleet's energy weapons. The captured ship's cannons roared to life, sending a devastating barrage towards the unsuspecting target. The satellite exploded in a brilliant flash, momentarily illuminating the darkness of space. Sterling didn't pause to admire his handiwork, immediately shifting his aim to the next target. "Multiple satellites destroyed," Lyra reported, her eyes scanning the tactical readouts. "The Vidian fleet's energy weapon output has decreased by 30%. Sterling allowed himself a moment of satisfaction before refocusing on the task at hand. "Good. Let's keep going. We need to level the playing field as much as possible." As the space battle raged above, the fate of Earth hung in the balance. The actions of these disparate groups of defenders, spread across the globe and beyond, would determine the future of humanity in the hours to come. "Come!" Suddenly, the ship's communication system crackled to life, interrupting Sterling's thoughts. Captain Sterling, this is Admiral Frost, came the urgent voice. We have a critical situation developing. The Vidian flagship has been damaged and is descending rapidly towards Earth's atmosphere. It's on a collision course with Eastern Europe. Sterling's eyes widened as he processed the information. Understood, Admiral. What are your orders? We're implementing Dr. Tanaka's electromagnetic pulse plan immediately, Frost replied, her voice tense but controlled. Continue your assault on the orbital satellites, but be prepared for potential power loss when the pulse hits. As Sterling acknowledged the order, Lyra looked at him with concern. An electromagnetic pulse? That could disable our ship as well. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Sterling said, refocusing on the task at hand. Right now, we need to take out as many of these satellites as possible. The captured Vidian ship continued its barrage against the orbital network, each successful hit weakening the alien fleet's energy weapon capabilities. However, their actions had not gone unnoticed. Aboard the Vidian command vessel, Grand Admiral Zeltheros observed the destruction of his orbital satellites with growing fury. Deploy the Zarkesh squadron, he ordered, his voice a low growl. Destroy that traitor's ship and bring me the head of the human pilot. In response to Zeltheros's command, a group of sleek, deadly fighter craft detached from the Vidian fleet. Their engines flared bright blue as they accelerated towards Sterling and Lyra's position. Incoming bogies, Lyra shouted, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Multiple Vidian fighters on an intercept course. Sterling's hands tightened on the controls. Time to see what this bird can really do, he muttered, pushing the captured ship into a series of evasive maneuvers. The space around them erupted into chaos as the Zarkesh squadron opened fire. Beams of energy crisscrossed the void, some barely missing the hull of Sterling's vessel. Hold on, Sterling called out as he executed a tight barrel roll, narrowly avoiding a concentrated burst of enemy fire. Lyra worked furiously at the weapon's console, returning fire whenever an opportunity presented itself. As the dogfight intensified, Admiral Frost coordinated the final preparations for the EMP strike from her command center in orbit. She watched the tactical displays with a mixture of anticipation and dread, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the fate of the entire planet. All EMP-equipped aircraft are in position, Admiral, reported her tactical officer. Awaiting your command. Frost took a deep breath, her mind racing through the potential consequences of her decision. The EMP would disable the falling Vidian flagship, potentially saving millions of lives, but it would also cripple Earth's remaining infrastructure. There was no time for second-guessing. Initiate the strike, she ordered, her voice steady and resolute. Across the globe, high-altitude aircraft simultaneously activated their EMP devices. A wave of invisible energy began to spread across the planet's surface, growing in intensity with each passing second. On the ground, the effects were almost instantaneous. In New York City, Captain James Bulldog Morrison and his makeshift resistance group were in the midst of a firefight with Vidian ground troops when suddenly the aliens' weapons went dead. For a moment, both sides stood in stunned silence. Their tech is down, Morrison shouted, seizing the opportunity. Move in now, as his team surged forward, engaging the now vulnerable Vidians in close combat. Similar scenes played out in cities around the world. The advanced alien weaponry that had given the invaders such a decisive advantage was now nothing more than dead weight. In the Arctic facility, Major Sarah Hawkins had just finished inputting the override code to deactivate the ancient Vidian AI when the EMP wave hit. The facility's systems, already in the process of shutting down, went completely dark. Hawkins found herself trapped in total darkness, the only sound her own rapid breathing. Well, she muttered to herself, activating a small chemical light stick out of the frying pan and into the freezer. Meanwhile, at the North American Military Command Center, the brutal battle between General Ramirez and Krax took an unexpected turn. As the EMP washed over them, Ramirez's powered armor suit suddenly went offline, its servos locking up and leaving him immobilized. Krax, his cybernetic enhancements equally affected, let out a roar of frustration. Before either combatant could react, the weakened structure of the command center gave way. Tons of concrete and steel came crashing down, burying both Ramirez and Krax under a mountain of debris. In orbit, Sterling's captured Vidian ship shuddered as the EMP wave reached them. Alarms blared throughout the vessel as systems began to fail. "We're losing power," Lyra shouted, her hands flying over the controls in a desperate attempt to maintain functionality. Sterling gritted his teeth, fighting to keep the ship stable as it began to drift. Around them, the Zarkesh squadron fighters suffered the same fate, their engines sputtering out and leaving them floating helplessly in space. As the EMP's effects rippled across the planet and into low orbit, the damaged Vidian flagship began its final descent towards Earth's surface. Its massive form, now completely without power, entered the atmosphere, leaving a trail of fire in its wake. In the Sahara Desert, Colonel Volkov and Dr. Amir watched in awe as the night sky lit up with the fiery entry of the Vidian vessel. Their own equipment, protected by hastily improvised Faraday cages, had survived the EMP strike. "The flagship is going down," Volkov said, his voice tight with tension. "But where will it land?" As the electromagnetic pulse subsided, a new reality set in across the globe. Both human and Vidian forces found themselves stripped of their advanced technology, forced to adapt to a suddenly more primitive battlefield. The war had entered a new phase, with the future of Earth hanging in the balance. In the eerie silence that followed the EMP strike, Admiral Frost's voice crackled over the emergency backup communication systems, addressing all remaining Earth forces. "The EMP strike was successful, but our fight is just getting started. All units, prepare for Phase 2 of our counteroffensive. The real battle begins now." Now. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of responsibility. As the electromagnetic pulse rippled across the globe, its effects were immediate and far-reaching. In New York City, Captain James Bulldog Morrison witnessed a sudden shift in the battlefield dynamics. The Vidian energy weapons, once devastating in their power, flickered and died in the aliens' hands. Morrison's eyes widened as he realized the opportunity before them. "Their tech is down," he shouted to his team of NYPD officers and civilian volunteers. "Move in now." The group surged forward, brandishing a mix of conventional firearms and improvised weapons. They engaged the disoriented Vidian troops in close combat, using their knowledge of the city's layout to their advantage. Morrison led a squad down a narrow alleyway, signaling for silence as they approached a group of Vidians struggling with their malfunctioning equipment. With a nod, he triggered the ambush. The humans burst from their hiding spots, overwhelming the aliens with a flurry of attacks. "Keep pushing," Morrison called out, driving his fist into a Vidian's face. "We've got them on the ropes." Meanwhile, at the North American Military Command Center, the confrontation between General Victor Ramirez and Krax took an unexpected turn. As the EMP wave washed over them, Ramirez felt his powered armor lock up, the servos freezing in place. He grunted with effort, trying to move his suddenly dead weight. Across from him, Krax let out a roar of frustration as his cybernetic enhancements failed. The two warriors, once augmented by advanced technology, now stood as equals. Before either could react, the weakened structure of the command center gave way. Tons of concrete and steel crashed down around them. Ramirez's world went dark as he was buried under the debris. When he regained consciousness, Ramirez found himself in a small pocket of space within the rubble. His armor, now nothing more than dead weight, pinned him to the ground. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he made out a shape moving nearby, Krax, also trapped and stripped of his technological advantages. Ramirez gritted his teeth and began the painstaking process of freeing himself from his powerless armor. Each movement was a struggle, but he pushed through the pain, driven by the knowledge that his survival depended on it. In orbit, Captain Marcus Maverick, Sterling, and Subcommander Lyra faced a dire situation aboard their captured Vidian vessel. The ship shuddered violently as its systems failed, leaving them adrift in the void of space. "We're losing power," Lyra shouted, her fingers dancing across the now unresponsive controls. Sterling's mind raced as he assessed their options. With the ship's main systems offline, they were on a collision course with Earth. He knew they had to act fast to avoid burning up in the atmosphere or crashing into a populated area. "Lyra, we need to vent the remaining fuel," Sterling called out, already moving towards the manual release valves. "We can use it to alter our trajectory." Working together, they managed to release controlled bursts of the ship's remaining fuel, slowly adjusting their descent path. As they entered the atmosphere, the vessel began to heat up rapidly. "We need a heat shield," Sterling muttered, his eyes scanning the ship's interior. "Help me strip these panels. We can use them to reinforce the hull." As they worked feverishly to improve their chances of survival, the ship's exterior glowed red-hot. Through the viewports, they could see the Pacific Ocean growing larger by the second. On the ground, the night sky lit up with the fiery trails of falling Vidian ships. Admiral Helena Frost, operating from a hardened command bunker, watched the displays with a mix of awe and commitment. "Initiate Operation Fallen Sky," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. "I want predictions on impact sites for all major Vidian vessels within the next 5 minutes." Her team sprang into action, using analog equipment and EMP-resistant technology to calculate the trajectories of the falling ships. As the data came in, Frost began coordinating with global military forces, directing them to the most critical crash sites. "Priority 1 is containing any surviving Vidian forces at the impact zones," Frost instructed. "We can't let them regroup and establish new strongholds." As dawn broke on the first post-EMP day, the world found itself thrust into a new era of warfare. The once dominant Vidian forces were scattered and vulnerable, while humanity's defenders adapted quickly to the changed battlefield. In the Arctic facility, Major Sarah Hawkins ignited another chemical light stick, its pale glow barely illuminating the ancient Vidian structure around her. She knew she had to find a way out, but the facility's electronic locks were now impenetrable barriers. As she explored the darkened corridors, Hawkins stumbled upon a chamber she hadn't noticed before. The room was filled with large, cylindrical pods, each containing a humanoid figure suspended in a clear liquid. "Cryogenic storage," Hawkins whispered, her breath visible in the cold air. She approached one of the pods, wiping away a layer of frost from its surface. The alien face that stared back at her was unlike any Vidian she had encountered so far. Hawkins's mind raced with the implications of her discovery. These preserved specimens could hold the key to understanding Vidian biology, and potentially their weaknesses. But first, she had to find a way out of the facility and report her findings. With rekindled tenacity, Hawkins began searching for a manual override to the lockdown systems. As she worked, the silent, frozen Vidians stood watch, unwitting guardians of secrets that could turn the tide of the war. As she worked, the silent, frozen Vidians stood watch, unwitting guardians of secrets that could turn the tide of the conflict. The facility's ancient mechanisms groaned to life as Hawkins activated the manual release. Dim emergency lights flickered on, casting long shadows across the icy corridors. She quickly gathered as much data as she could, snapping photos with her backup analog camera and scribbling notes on a waterproof pad. As the heavy doors slowly opened, Hawkins felt a rush of frigid air. She took one last look at the cryogenic chambers, her mind racing with the potential implications of her discovery. With a deep breath, she stepped out into the Arctic wasteland, ready to make her way back to civilization and share her findings. Meanwhile, in New York City, Captain James Bulldog Morrison surveyed the changed urban landscape. The once bustling streets were now eerily quiet, save for the occasional sound of distant combat. "All right, people," Morrison addressed his team. "We've got the advantage of home turf. Let's use it." He directed groups to gather materials from nearby construction sites and hardware stores. Soon, the streets became a maze of improvised fortifications. Overturned buses formed the base of barricades, while sheets of plywood and metal scaffolding created a network of cover and concealment. Morrison watched as his officers worked alongside civilian volunteers, their faces grimy but determined. "Jenkins, take your group and set up a choke point at 42nd and Lexington," he ordered. "Santiago, I want you to rig some noise makers along 5th Avenue. Let's keep those alien bastards guessing." As the sun rose higher, the sounds of battle grew closer. Morrison climbed to a rooftop vantage point, binoculars in hand. In the distance, he could see a group of Vidians advancing cautiously, their once fearsome energy weapons now nothing more than dead weight. "They're coming," he muttered into his handheld radio. "Everyone to your positions. Remember, we're fighting for our home. Make every shot count." Far from the urban battleground, in the ruins of the North American Military Command Center, General Victor Ramirez and Cracks continued their brutal struggle. Without their powered suits and cybernetic enhancements, the fight had devolved into a primal contest of strength and skill. Ramirez felt his muscles burn as he grappled with the Vidian warrior. Years of hand-to-hand combat training kicked in as he sought an advantage. Crax's alien physiology made him a formidable opponent, but Ramirez noticed the creature tiring. Seizing an opportunity, Ramirez broke free from Crax's grip and lunged for a piece of rebar protruding from the rubble. He grasped the makeshift weapon and swung it in a wide arc, catching Crax across the midsection. The Vidian let out a guttural roar of pain and anger. Ramirez pressed his advantage, striking again and again at the alien's vulnerable points. With a final, decisive blow, he brought the rebar down on Crax's head, sending the warrior crumpling to the ground. Panting heavily, Ramirez stood over his fallen foe. He allowed himself only a moment's respite before turning his attention to the rubble surrounding them. With steadfast perseverance, he began the arduous task of digging his way out. As Ramirez worked, his mind turned to the battles still raging across the globe. He knew that every second counted, and he was determined to rejoin the fight and rally Earth's remaining forces. In the Pacific Ocean, several miles off the Hawaiian coast, Captain Marcus, Maverick, Sterling, and Subcommander Lyra fought for survival in the aftermath of their crash landing. The Vidian vessel creaked and groaned as it began to sink beneath the waves. "We need to move now," Sterling shouted, grabbing an emergency raft from a storage compartment. He and Lyra scrambled to inflate the raft as water began to flood the ship's interior. With seconds to spare, they leapt into the raft and pushed away from the sinking vessel. Sterling's arms burned as he paddled furiously, putting distance between them and the descending ship. Lyra, still in shock from the crash, stared at the human with a mix of confusion and grudging respect. "Why did you save me?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the lapping waves. Sterling paused his paddling for a moment, meeting her gaze. "Because right now, survival is all that matters. Human or Vidian, we're in this together." As they turned toward the distant Hawaiian shoreline, both knew that their journey was nowhere near the end. The raft bobbed in the vast expanse of the Pacific, a tiny speck of life in an ocean of uncertainty. On the other side of the world, in the Sahara Desert, Colonel Alexei Volkov and Dr. Muhammad Amir stood before their completed acoustic weapon prototype. The device, a Frankenstein's monster of salvaged speakers, amplifiers, and a hand-cranked generator, looked more like a science fair project than a weapon of war. "Are you certain this will work, Doctor?" Volkov asked, eyeing the contraption skeptically. Amir nodded, his face a mask of confidence despite the butterflies in his stomach. "The theory is sound, Colonel. The Vidian auditory system should be particularly susceptible to these frequencies." Volkov turned to his small team of soldiers. "Prepare for the test. Remember, if this fails, we'll be facing the enemy with conventional weapons." The group moved silently across the dunes, approaching a small encampment of stranded Vidian soldiers. As they got into position, Volkov gave the signal to activate the weapon. The air seemed to vibrate as the device emitted its high-pitched frequency. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, suddenly, the Vidians began to writhe in agony, their hands clutching at their head-like appendages. Within seconds, they collapsed to the ground unconscious. Volkov allowed himself a small smile. "Well done, Doctor. It seems we have a new weapon in our arsenal." As the team moved in to secure the incapacitated Vidians, Amir's mind was already racing with ideas for improving and replicating the device. He knew that in this new, post-EMP world, such innovations could mean the difference between victory and extinction. In her EMP-hardened command bunker, Admiral Helena Frost pored over reports from across the globe. The notifications from Central Europe caught her attention, painting a grim picture of a massive Vidian ground force mobilizing. "They're adapting faster than we anticipated," she muttered, her eyes scanning the intel. The Vidians had begun commandeering human vehicles and weapons, preparing for a large-scale conventional assault on major European cities. Frost's mind raced through potential countermeasures. She knew that without their advanced technology, the aliens would be relying on brute force and numbers. It was time to level the playing field. "Get me a secure line to all European military leaders," she ordered her communications officer. "We're initiating Operation Hammer and Anvil." As her staff scrambled to make the connections, Frost began outlining her plan. They would use the urban environments to their advantage, setting up multi-layered defenses using pre-digital era weapons and tactics. The cities would become fortresses, and the Vidians would pay dearly for every inch of ground they took. Across the Atlantic, in a hastily assembled research facility, Dr. Hiroshi Tanaka watched as his team put the finishing touches on their EMP-resistant power source. The device, a marvel of mechanical energy storage and simple electronic components, hummed to life. "Begin the deployment," Tanaka instructed, his voice betraying a mix of excitement and exhaustion. "Prioritize hospitals and emergency services." As the first units were loaded onto trucks, Tanaka allowed himself a moment of hope. With power restored to critical facilities, they could begin to turn the tide. Treatment for the wounded, coordination of resistance efforts, and the possibility of reactivating some of their defensive systems, all of this now seemed within reach. But even as these small victories were won, a new threat loomed on the horizon. Beyond the moon's orbit, the Vidian Reserve Fleet began its approach to Earth. Unaffected by the EMP strike, these ships represented a grave danger to the planet's hard-won advantage. In her command bunker, Admiral Frost received the alert from the remaining long-range radar installations. Her face hardened as she processed the implications of this new development. Earth's disabled orbital defense systems left them vulnerable to this approaching armada. "It's time for Project Longbow," she announced to her staff, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "Alert all available missile silo crews. We're going to give those aliens a welcome they won't forget." As night fell on the second day post-EMP, humanity stood at a crossroads. The disabled Vidian ground forces were regrouping, a conventional assault loomed in Europe, and now a fresh threat approached from space. Yet in cities, deserts, and secret bunkers around the world, Earth's defenders prepared to face these challenges head-on. The coming dawn would bring with it a new phase of the war, one that would test the limits of human ingenuity and resilience. As engineers worked tirelessly to modify intercontinental ballistic missiles into makeshift anti-spacecraft weapons, the fate of the planet hung in the balance. The battle for Earth was just the beginning, and its defenders stood ready to fight with every weapon at their disposal, from the most primitive to the most innovative. In New York City, Captain Morrison surveyed his fortified position, knowing that the real test was yet to come. In the Arctic, Major Hawkins trudged through the snow, carrying with her information that could change the course of the war. And in the vast Pacific, Sterling and Lyra paddled their small raft towards an uncertain future. As the first light of the third day began to break, humanity prepared to write the next chapter in its fight for survival. The coming hours would determine whether Earth would remain free or fall to the Vidian invaders. And across the globe, countless individuals stood ready to make their stand, each playing their part in the greatest battle in human history. As the first light of the third day began to break, humanity prepared to write the next chapter in its fight for survival. The coming hours would determine whether Earth would remain free or fall to the Vidian invaders. And across the globe, countless individuals stood ready to make their stand, each playing their part in the greatest battle in human history. At precisely 0600 hours UTC, the sky lit up with streaks of fire as dozens of modified intercontinental ballistic missiles soared into the atmosphere. Project Longbow, the brainchild of Admiral Helena Frost, had been put into motion. In her underground command bunker, Frost watched the radar displays with intense focus, her fingers drumming nervously on the console. "Status report," she barked, her eyes never leaving the screen. "All missiles have cleared the atmosphere, Admiral," a technician reported. "Tracking systems indicate they're on course for the Vidian fleet." Frost nodded, allowing herself a brief moment of satisfaction. But she knew the battle was far from won. "Keep monitoring. I want to know the second we have confirmation of impact." As the missiles streaked towards their targets, the situation on the ground was rapidly evolving. In Central Europe, the predicted Vidian ground assault had begun in earnest. The once peaceful fields and forests now echoed with the sounds of battle as thousands of alien soldiers advanced towards major cities. In a hastily fortified position outside Prague, Lieutenant Karel Novak peered through a pair of binoculars at the approaching Vidian forces. The sight of human tanks and armored vehicles in the hands of the aliens sent a chill down his spine. "They're using our own weapons against us," he muttered to his second-in-command. "At least they can't use the high-tech stuff," the other soldier replied, patting the stock of his bolt-action rifle. "Sometimes, old school is the best school." Novak grinned despite the gravity of the situation. "Let's hope you're right. Get ready to signal the artillery." As the Vidian forces came within range, Novak raised a flare gun and fired a bright red signal into the sky. Moments later, the air was filled with the whistling of artillery shells as a barrage of manually operated howitzers opened fire on the alien advance. The front line erupted in chaos as explosions tore through the Vidian ranks. Novak watched with grim satisfaction as several commandeered tanks went up in flames. But the aliens pressed on, their superior numbers allowing them to absorb the losses and continue their advance. "Fall back to secondary positions," Novak shouted, waving his arm to signal the retreat. As his troops melted away into pre-prepared fallback points, he knew the real test was yet to come. The guerrilla phase of Operation Hammer and Anvil was about to begin. Half a world away, on a sun-drenched Hawaiian beach, Captain Marcus Maverick, Sterling, and Subcommander Lyra found themselves staring down the barrels of several assault rifles. The U.S. Navy SEALs who had emerged from the jungle looked as if they hadn't slept in days, their faces streaked with camouflage paint and unshakable focus. "Identify yourselves," growled the lead SEAL, his weapon trained squarely on Sterling's chest. Sterling raised his hand slowly. "Captain Marcus Sterling, United States Air Force. The alien is Subcommander Lyra. She's with me." The SEALs exchanged glances, clearly unsure how to proceed. After a tense moment, their leader lowered his weapon slightly. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Jack Wilson. You'd better have a damn good explanation for this, Captain." As Sterling began to recount their harrowing escape and crash landing, Wilson's expression shifted from suspicion to grudging respect. When Sterling finished his tale, Wilson nodded thoughtfully. "All right, Captain. You've bought yourself a ticket to our little slice of paradise. Follow us, and keep your alien friend close. Not everyone's going to be as understanding as we are." As they made their way through the dense Hawaiian jungle, Sterling couldn't help but marvel at the SEALs' improvised base camp. Camouflage netting stretched between trees, concealing a collection of tents and equipment salvaged from military and civilian sources alike. Wilson led them to a large tent at the center of the camp. Inside, a group of officers huddled around a map-covered table, discussing strategy in hushed tones. They looked up as Wilson entered with Sterling and Lyra in tow. "Gentlemen," Wilson announced, "we've got some new additions to our merry band, and they might just have the intel we need to turn this fight around." In New York City, the streets of Manhattan had become a brutal urban battlefield. Captain James "Bulldog" Morrison crouched behind an overturned taxi, the acrid smell of smoke filling his nostrils. He peered around the edge of his cover, watching as a group of Vidians cautiously made their way down Fifth Avenue. "Now!" he whispered into his radio. In an instant, the seemingly abandoned street erupted into action. Improvised explosive devices hidden in trash cans and newspaper boxes detonated, sending shrapnel tearing through the alien ranks. From windows and rooftops, Morrison's fighters opened fire with a mix of civilian hunting rifles and police-issue weapons. The Vidians, caught completely off guard, scrambled for cover. But Morrison's team had planned for this. As the aliens retreated into nearby buildings, they triggered tripwires and pressure plates, setting off more explosives and collapsing entryways. Morrison allowed himself a grim smile as he watched the chaos unfold. His guerrilla tactics were working, keeping the technologically superior invaders off balance and unable to establish a foothold in the city. As the firefight intensified, Morrison caught sight of a Vidian officer barking orders to his troops. Taking careful aim with a scoped rifle, Morrison squeezed the trigger. The aliens had exploded in a spray of purple gore, and its subordinates fell into disarray. "Push them back!" Morrison shouted, waving his team forward. "Don't let them regroup." As the New Yorkers pressed their advantage, driving the Vidians out of Central Park and into the surrounding streets, Morrison couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. They might be outgunned and outnumbered, but they weren't about to let their city fall without a fight. In the sweltering heat of the Sahara Desert, Colonel Alexei Volkov wiped the sweat from his brow as he surveyed the makeshift assembly line before him. What had once been an abandoned warehouse was now a hive of activity, with local volunteers working alongside his soldiers to produce Dr. Muhammad Amir's acoustic weapons. "How many units have we completed?" Volkov asked, turning to Amir. The scientist consulted a clipboard. 57 so far, Colonel. But we're picking up speed. I believe we can double that number by nightfall." Volkov nodded approvingly. "Excellent work, Doctor. These weapons may well turn the tide in our favor." As if to emphasize his point, a group of Tuareg nomads arrived at the warehouse, their camels laden with salvaged electronic components. Volkov had enlisted their help in scouring the desert for usable materials, and their knowledge of the harsh terrain had proven invaluable. "We must get these weapons into the field as quickly as possible," Volkov said, watching as the new components were unloaded. "Our forces in Cairo and Tripoli are in desperate need of reinforcement." Amir nodded gravely. "I understand, Colonel. We'll have the first shipment ready to move out by dawn." As night fell on the third day post-EMP, Admiral Frost received the news she had been waiting for. The modified ICBMs of Project Longbow had found their marks, inflicting significant damage on the approaching Vidian Reserve Fleet. "Multiple confirmed hits, Admiral," her tactical officer reported. "We're seeing widespread disruption in their formation." Frost allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction, but it quickly faded as she processed the rest of the report. And the ships that evaded our attack? The officer's expression grew grim. Still on course for Earth, ma'am. Estimated time to low orbit, 48 hours. Frost's mind raced, calculating odds and weighing options. She knew that the damaged Vidian ships would buy them some time, but it wouldn't be enough. They needed a new strategy and fast. "Initiate Operation Slingshot Redux," she ordered, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "I want every available engineer and former astronaut working on this. We're going to turn our rockets into the biggest minefield this solar system has ever seen." As her staff scrambled to put the plan into motion, Frost turned her attention to a new alert flashing on her console. The message from Major Sarah Hawkins in the Arctic sent a jolt of excitement through her. The data on Vidian biology could be the key to developing more effective countermeasures. But before Frost could fully process this new information, another alert demanded her attention. Long-range sensors had detected a massive energy buildup in lunar orbit emanating from the far side of the moon. "What in God's name is that?" Frost whispered, staring at the readings in disbelief. As the implications of this new threat sank in, Frost realized that the war had just entered a new and even more dangerous phase. With Earth's forces stretched to their limits and time running out, she would need every ounce of her strategic genius to counter this latest Vidian move. The fourth day post-MP dawned with humanity facing challenges on multiple fronts. From the urban battlegrounds of New York and Prague to the vast expanses of space, the fight for Earth's survival raged on. And as Admiral Frost grappled with the latest Vidian threat, she knew that the coming hours would test the limits of human ingenuity and courage like never before. As the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, Admiral Frost's command center buzzed with renewed urgency. The mysterious energy buildup on the far side of the moon demanded immediate attention. "We need eyes on that Vidian superweapon," Frost declared, her voice cutting through the tense atmosphere. "Initiate Operation Lunar Shadow." Her staff sprang into action, coordinating with a team in Australia to reactivate a long-dormant lunar monitoring station. The facility, a relic of Cold War paranoia, had languished in obscurity for decades. Now, its outdated technology proved to be its greatest asset, having survived the EMP attack unscathed. As technicians worked to bring the station online, reports flooded in from around the globe. In Central Europe, Lieutenant Karel Novak watched in awe as a restored Panzer IV rumbled past his position, its tracks clanking against the pavement. The vintage tank, pulled from a museum and hastily recommissioned, led a column of World War II-era vehicles towards the Vidian front lines. "Those aliens won't know what hit them," Novak's radio man chuckled, patting the bolt-action rifle slung over his shoulder. Novak nodded, a grim smile playing across his lips. "Let's hope our grandfather's weapons are up to the task." The counterattack began with a thunderous barrage from restored artillery pieces. Vidian positions erupted in chaos as shells rained down, their modern energy shields useless against the crude but effective projectiles. Novak watched through his binoculars as alien soldiers scrambled for cover, clearly caught off guard by the antiquated assault. Halfway across the world, on the sun-drenched beaches of Hawaii, Captain Marcus Maverick Sterling crouched beside Sub-Commander Lyra and Lieutenant Commander Jack Wilson. The trio pored over a crude map of Oahu, planning their assault on the Vidian command post. "Their security protocols are based on advanced biometrics," Lyra explained, her alien features set in concentration. "But without their main systems, they've resorted to using simplified codes. I can get us past the outer perimeter." Wilson nodded, his face streaked with camouflage paint. "Once we're inside, my team can plant the charges. But we'll need a distraction to make our exit." Sterling grinned, a spark of his old cockiness returning. "Leave that to me. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve that even the Vidians won't see coming." As night fell over the island, Sterling led the joint human-alien team towards their target. The distant sound of waves crashing against the shore masked their approach as they slipped past the first line of Vidian sentries. In New York City, Captain James Bulldog Morrison circled his captured prize, a Vidian officer, bound and glaring defiantly at his human captors. Morrison's fighters had ambushed the aliens' convoy as it moved between checkpoints, using the city's labyrinthine streets to their advantage. "Start talking," Morrison growled, leaning in close to the alien's face. "How are you coordinating your forces without your fancy tech?" The Vidian remained silent, but Morrison noticed its eyes darting towards a device on the table, something that looked like a cross between a ham radio and a child's toy. Well, Morrison murmured, picking up the object. "Looks like we've got ourselves a new toy to play with. Boys and girls." As Morrison's team began dissecting the alien communication device, Colonel Alexei Volkov oversaw the departure of another convoy from his Saharan base. Trucks laden with Dr. Amir's acoustic weapons rumbled off into the desert night, bound for resistance cells across Africa and the Middle East. "Godspeed," Volkov muttered, watching the taillights disappear over a dune. He turned to Amir, who stood beside him, clutching his ever-present clipboard. "How many more could we produce by morning?" Amir consulted his notes. "At our current rate, we should have another 100 units ready for distribution by dawn." Volkov nodded approvingly. "Excellent. Our fighters will put them to good use." As if to confirm his words, reports began trickling in from the field. In Cairo, a small team armed with the acoustic weapons had successfully neutralized an entire Vidian patrol without firing a single shot. Similar successes were reported from Tripoli, Khartoum, and beyond. Meanwhile, in the American Midwest, General Victor Ramirez orchestrated a series of lightning-fast strikes against Vidian positions. His mobile defense force, now a motley assortment of vintage military vehicles and civilian volunteers, struck hard and fast before melting away into the vast prairies. "Hit them again!" Ramirez barked into his radio as he watched a column of smoke rise from a Vidian supply depot. "Keep them guessing, keep them off balance." Back at Admiral Frost's command bunker, Major Sarah Hawkins arrived with a data drive clutched tightly in her hand. The information on Vidian biology, retrieved at great cost from the Arctic facility, could prove to be the key to turning the tide of the war. "Get this to our science team immediately," Frost ordered as Hawkins handed over the precious drive. "I want actionable strategies based on this data within the hour." As scientists and tacticians pored over the new information, Frost turned her attention to the launch preparations for Operation Slingshot Redux. Around the globe, modified rockets stood ready on repurposed launch pads, their payloads of improvised space mines primed for deployment. "Launch sequence initiated," a technician announced. Frost watched the monitors intently as the first rocket ignited, climbing into the night sky on a pillar of flame. One by one, rockets lifted off from sites around the world, carrying their deadly cargo into low Earth orbit. As the mines began to form a defensive barrier against the approaching Vidian fleet, Frost allowed herself a moment of cautious optimism. But the moment was short-lived. A communications officer approached, his face pale. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the Civilian Astronomy Network. They've detected unusual activity on Mars." Frost's eyes narrowed as she studied the grainy images on the screen. The red planet's surface was dotted with structures that seemed to be coming to life, pulsing with an eerie energy. "An ancient Vidian outpost," she breathed, the implication sending a chill down her spine. Before she could fully process this new development, another alert demanded her attention. The team in Australia had successfully reactivated the lunar monitoring station. The first images of the Vidian superweapon were starting to come through. Frost's eyebrows furrowed as she took in the massive structure on the moon's far side. It was time to put Operation Lunar Shadow into motion. "Get me Colonel Frank Webb," she ordered. "Tell him to suit up. We're going back to the moon." "Moon," Frost's words hung in the air for a moment before the command center erupted into a flurry of activity. Colonel Frank Webb arrived within the hour, his weathered face set with perseverance. As he entered the briefing room, Frost wasted no time in outlining the mission. "Frank, we're reactivating Project Artemis. The Phoenix is prepped and waiting in New Mexico. You leave in 6 hours." Webb nodded, his mind already racing through the logistics. "Who's my team?" Frost handed him a tablet. 4 of our best Special Forces operators and 2 engineers. They're en route now. As Webb familiarized himself with his team's dossiers, Frost turned her attention to the global theater. Reports streamed in from across Europe, where General Hans Muller was mobilizing for a massive counteroffensive. In the pre-dawn hours of the 5th day post-MP, the New Mexico desert came alive with activity. The Phoenix, a refurbished Apollo-era spacecraft, stood proudly on the launch pad, bathed in floodlights. Colonel Webb and his team boarded the craft, each step carrying the weight of humanity's hopes. The countdown echoed across the facility. T-minus 10, 9, 8. Webb closed his eyes, memories of his first lunar mission flooding back. 3, 2, 1. Ignition! The Phoenix roared to life, pushing against gravity with primal force. Webb felt the familiar press of acceleration as the craft climbed higher, piercing the atmosphere. As the Phoenix soared towards the moon, dawn broke over Central Europe. General Muller stood atop a command vehicle, surveying the assembled armada of World War II-era tanks. Sherman T-34 and Panzer IV engines rumbled to life, a symphony of mechanical might. Muller's voice crackled over the radio. "All units, Operation Ironclad is go. Forward." The tanks lurched forward, tracks clanking against pavement. As they crested a hill, the Vidian positions came into view. The aliens, caught off guard by the antiquated assault, scrambled to mount a defense. The first volley from the Sherman tank struck home, sending plumes of smoke and debris into the air. Vidian energy weapons lashed out in retaliation, but many of their shots went wide, their targeting systems confused by the crude metal signatures of the human vehicles. Across the Pacific, on the island of Oahu, Captain Marcus Sterling led his team through the shadows of Pearl Harbor Naval Base. Sub-Commander Lyra moved with feline grace, her alien physiology allowing her to see heat signatures of the Vidian guards. 3 sentries at the next checkpoint, she whispered. Sterling nodded to Lieutenant Commander Wilson, who readied a pair of stun grenades. The devices sailed through the air, detonating with a blinding flash. Before the Vidian guards could recover, Sterling's team was upon them. Inside the command post, Wilson and his engineers worked quickly to plant explosives at key structural points. Sterling kept watch, his nerves on edge. "Charges set," Wilson reported. "Ready for exfil." As they retreated, Sterling activated the diversion he'd prepared. A series of fireworks launched from multiple points around the island. The night sky erupted in a dazzling display, drawing Vidian attention away from the escaping saboteurs. In New York City, Captain James Morrison stood before a gathering of civilians, police officers, and firefighters in the basement of an abandoned subway station. The captured Vidian communication device sat on a table before him, modified by NYPD tech experts. "Today, we take back our city," Morrison declared. "Each of you knows your targets. Hit fast, hit hard, and disappear into the concrete jungle." As the sun rose over Manhattan, the uprising began. Thousands poured from hidden bunkers and abandoned buildings. FDNY trucks, sirens blaring, charged Vidian blockades. NYPD sharpshooters provided cover fire from rooftops as civilians armed with improvised weapons swarmed alien positions. Morrison led a team towards the Vidian headquarters in Central Park. Using the modified alien device, they jammed local Vidian communications, sowing chaos among the invaders. Meanwhile, in the Sahara, Colonel Volkov's base was under siege. Vidian dropships disgorged waves of troops, their weapons trained on the makeshift factory. "Activate the sonic barrier," Volkov shouted. Dr. Amir threw a series of switches. A wall of invisible force expanded outward, rippling the air. The advancing Vidians stumbled, clutching their heads in agony as the acoustic weapons took effect. Volkov grabbed a rifle. "Hold the line! We cannot lose this facility." Near Chicago, General Ramirez's elaborate trap was sprung. Vidian forces, lured by false transmissions and holographic decoys, advanced towards Lake Michigan. As they reached the shore, the water erupted. Submarines, their hulls streaked with rust, surfaced in a coordinated assault. Deck guns opened fire, while missiles streaked skyward. Simultaneously, hidden artillery positions along the coast unleashed a devastating barrage. Caught in the crossfire, the Vidian force was decimated. Ramirez watched from a nearby hilltop, allowing himself a grim smile of satisfaction. In orbit, the first wave of the Vidian Reserve Fleet encountered Operation Slingshot Redix Minefield. Brilliant explosions lit up the night sky as ships were torn apart or left crippled and adrift. Admiral Frost watched the data stream in, her face illuminated by the soft glow of monitors. "Redirect defensive batteries to Sector 7, she ordered. "Don't let a single ship slip through." As Earth's forces battled on multiple fronts, the Phoenix approached lunar orbit. Colonel Webb peered out the viewport, his eyes fixed on the moon's cratered surface. "Energy spike detected," one of the engineers reported. "The Vidian weapon is powering up." Webb's teeth clenched. "Take us in. We're landing in Aitken Basin." The Phoenix descended, touching down on the lunar surface in a cloud of dust. As the team prepared for their sortie, Webb caught sight of a massive structure just beyond the horizon, the Vidian superweapon. "Suit up," he ordered. "We've got a long walk ahead of us." As the lunar team began their trek across the alien landscape, a new alert flashed on Admiral Frost's console. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's face appeared on the screen, her eyes wide with excitement. "Admiral, we've done it," she exclaimed. "We've cracked the fundamental principles of Vidian FDL technology." Frost leaned forward, her mind racing with possibilities. "Explain." As Rodriguez launched into a technical explanation, Frost's gaze drifted to the array of screens before her. Earth cities burned, tanks rolled across Europe, and a small team of humans took their first steps towards an alien fortress on the moon. The 5th day of the invasion was just getting started, and humanity's struggle for survival had now expanded beyond the confines of their home planet. With newfound hope in the form of scientific breakthroughs and hard-won victories, Earth's defenders prepared to face whatever challenges the coming hours would bring. With newfound hope in the form of scientific breakthroughs and hard-won victories, Earth's defenders prepared to face whatever challenges the coming hours would bring. As the 6th day post-MP dawned, Colonel Frank Moonwalker Webb and his team of Special Forces operators found themselves traversing the desolate lunar landscape. Their modified lunar rovers, equipped with makeshift weaponry, glided silently across the moon's surface. The Earth hung in the sky, a blue marble partially obscured by swirling clouds and the occasional flash of orbital combat. Webb's voice crackled over the comms. "All right, team. We're approaching the target. Maintain radio silence and stick to the plan." The Vidian superweapon installation loomed on the horizon, its alien architecture a stark contrast to the natural craters surrounding it. As they drew closer, the team was struck by the lack of external defenses. "Something's not right," muttered Lieutenant Sarachun, her eyes scanning the perimeter. "Where are the guards?" Webb's instincts screamed danger, but they pressed on. Using the natural cover provided by the lunar terrain, they approached the facility's outer walls. To their surprise, they encountered no resistance. Breach point located, reported Corporal Mike Tanner, attaching a shaped charge to the structure. The explosion was silent in the vacuum of space, but the vibrations traveled through their suits. As the dust settled, they found themselves staring into a dimly lit corridor. Meanwhile, on Earth, the Sahara Desert had become a battleground. Colonel Alexei Volkov stood atop a makeshift watchtower, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The air shimmered with the effects of the acoustic weapons, creating a barrier around the facility. "Hold the line!" Volkov's voice boomed over the comms. "We cannot let them take this facility." Dr. Muhammad Amir worked feverishly inside the main building, coordinating the evacuation of critical personnel and equipment. The ground shook as Vidian energy, weapons impacted nearby. "How much longer?" Volkov demanded, ducking as debris rained down around him. 10 minutes, Amir replied, his voice strained. "We need 10 more minutes." In orbit, Admiral Helena Frost watched as the improvised space mine network continued to wreak havoc on the approaching Vidian fleet. The command bunker hummed with activity as technicians monitored the unfolding battle. "Admiral," a young officer called out, "the ground-based laser network is online and ready for deployment." Frost nodded, her eyes never leaving the main display. "Activate the system. Target the damaged ships first." Across the globe, massive industrial lasers, hastily repurposed and aimed skyward, burst to life. Beams of concentrated energy lanced into space, striking the already battered Vidian ships. The combined assault of space mines and ground-based lasers forced the alien fleet to adopt a more cautious approach, buying Earth precious time. In the Pacific, the aftermath of Sterling and Wilson's covert operation was unfolding. Captain Marcus Maverick Sterling stood on the bridge of the USS Nimitz, watching as a coalition of naval forces from the United States, Japan, and Australia assembled around Pearl Harbor. "All ships reporting ready, sir," his XO reported. Sterling nodded, his face hardened. "Then let's take back our islands. Commence Operation Pacific Resurgence." As the naval armada set sail, reports flooded in from across Europe. General Hans Muller's Operation Ironclad had pushed the Vidian forces back to the outskirts of Berlin. The streets of the German capital echoed with the rumble of vintage tanks and the chatter of small arms fire. Muller himself stood in the control room of a recently reactivated nuclear power plant, watching as engineers worked to bring the facility online. The lights flickered, then steadied as power began to flow. "It's working," one of the technicians exclaimed. "We're back on the grid." In New York City, the urban warfare had reached a fever pitch. Captain James Bulldog Morrison led a mixed force of NYPD officers, firefighters, and civilian volunteers through the concrete canyons of Manhattan. They moved from building to building, clearing Vidian strongholds block by block. As they approached the United Nations headquarters, Morrison held up a fist, signaling the group to halt. He peered around the corner, taking in the alien fortifications surrounding the iconic building. "This is it," he said, turning to face his team. "We take this building, we take back our city." On Mars, the situation was evolving rapidly. Earth-based astronomers watched in awe as the objects launched from the ancient Vidian outpost began to assemble themselves in Martian orbit. The structure grew larger by the hour, its purpose unknown but undoubtedly ominous. Back in the command bunker, Admiral Frost received an urgent communication from Dr. Elena Rodriguez. The scientist's face appeared on the main screen, her eyes wide with excitement. "Admiral, we've done it," Rodriguez announced. "The FTL disruptor prototype is ready for deployment." Frost leaned forward, her mind racing with the possibilities. "How soon can we have it operational?" "We can begin installation on our orbital platforms within the hour," Rodriguez replied. As Earth's defenders fought on multiple fronts, the fate of humanity hung in the balance. On the Moon, Colonel Webb and his team ventured deeper into the Vidian superweapon facility, unaware of the true nature of the threat they faced. In orbit and on the ground, battles raged across the globe, and in the depths of space, an ancient Vidian outpost on Mars stirred to life, its purpose yet to be revealed. The 6th day of the invasion was not nearly finished, and the struggle for Earth's survival had only just begun. As the 6th day bled into the 7th, Colonel Frank Moonwalker Webb and his team pushed deeper into the Vidian superweapon facility on the moon. The eerie silence of the lunar landscape gave way to the muted thuds of their magnetized boots against the metallic floors. "Plant the charges here," Webb whispered, gesturing to a massive power conduit. His team worked with practiced efficiency, their gloved hands deftly attaching the nuclear devices to key structural points. As Corporal Mike Tanner secured the final charge, a harsh alien screech echoed through the corridor. Webb's head snapped up, his eyes widening behind his helmet's visor. "We've got company," he hissed. "Fall back to the extraction point." The team retreated, their movements hampered by the bulky spacesuits. Vidian energy blasts sizzled past them, leaving scorch marks on the walls. Webb activated his suit's enhanced jumping capabilities, leaping impossible distances between cover points in the low gravity. "Go!" he shouted to his team as they reached the airlock. "I'll hold them off." Webb's rifle cracked in the enclosed space, the sound muffled by his helmet. He bounded from pillar to pillar, using the moon's reduced gravity to his advantage. The Vidians, unused to the environment, struggled to track his movements. Back on Earth, Admiral Helena Frost stood in the bustling command center, her eyes fixed on the main display. A blinking that represented the cargo plane, carrying Dr. Elena Rodriguez's FDL disruptor as it climbed to altitude over the Rocky Mountains. "Activate the device," Frost ordered, her voice tense. The screen flickered, then stabilized. A shimmering field expanded outward from the plane's position, enveloping a large swath of North America. In orbit, chaos erupted among the Vidian ships. Several vessels attempting FDL jumps materialized in grotesque, twisted forms. Others found themselves trapped, unable to escape the expanding disruptor field. "It's working," Frost breathed, allowing herself a moment of relief. "Direct all available firepower on those disabled ships. We won't get another chance like this." Across the Pacific, Operation Pacific Resurgence gathered momentum. Admiral Hiroshi Tanaka stood on the bridge of the Japanese destroyer JS Kirishima, watching as the combined naval force approached Guam. "Launch the assault," Tanaka commanded, his voice steady. A flotilla of civilian boats, alongside military vessels, surged towards the island's beaches. The Vidian occupiers, caught off guard by the unconventional approach, scrambled to mount a defense. Marines and Special Forces operators hit the sand, their weapons blazing. Local resistance fighters emerged from hidden bunkers, joining the assault. The battle for Guam raged across the island's lush interior and war-torn streets. In New York City, Captain James Bulldog Morrison crouched in the shadow of an overturned taxi, his makeshift command center in the chaos of Manhattan. The chatter of gunfire echoed off the skyscrapers as his forces pushed towards the United Nations building. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine filled the air. Morrison's radio crackled to life with panic reports. Biomechanical drones emerging from the subway. A voice shouted, "They're everywhere." Morrison watched in horror as swarms of insect-like machines poured from nearby subway entrances. The mechanical creatures attacked indiscriminately, their razor-sharp appendages slicing through flesh and armor alike. "Fall back," Morrison ordered. "Seal off the subway entrances. We need to contain this." His mind raced, formulating a plan. "Get me the fire department," he barked into his radio. "We're going to flood those tunnels." In the Sahara, Colonel Alexei Volkov watched as the last of the acoustic weapons were loaded onto the convoy trucks. The whine of Vidian engines grew louder, signaling the approach of their pursuers. "Move out," Volkov shouted. jumping into the lead vehicle. Head for the Atlas Mountains. Use the remaining weapons to cover our retreat. The convoy roared to life, a trail of dust marking their path across the desert. Behind them, the acoustic weapons facility erupted in a series of controlled explosions, denying the aliens their prize. Near Chicago, General Victor Ramirez stared in disbelief at the massive, spider-like Vidian walker emerging from Lake Michigan. Its metallic legs crushed cars and buildings as it advanced, impervious to conventional weapons fire. "Sir," a young lieutenant reported, "the EMP tanks are ready." Ramirez nodded grimly. "Engage that walker. Hit it with everything we've got." The modified M1 Abrams tanks rolled forward, their experimental EMP generators humming with power. They circled the alien construct, firing bursts of electromagnetic energy at its vulnerable joints and sensors. As Earth's defenders fought on multiple fronts, the mysterious Vidian structure in Mars' orbit continued to grow. Flashes of energy pulsed around it, hinting at its ominous purpose. In the command bunker, Admiral Frost received an urgent report. "Ma'am, long-range sensors are detecting a massive energy buildup beyond Neptune. It matches Vidian FDL signatures." Frost's eyes hardened. She knew what this meant. Reinforcements were coming. The window for securing victory was rapidly closing. "Get me our top scientists and strategists," she ordered. "We need to develop countermeasures for whatever's coming from Mars, and we need them now." As the seventh day of the invasion stretched on, humanity's resistance teetered on a knife's edge. The successes of the lunar mission, the FDL disruptor, and the ground campaigns offered hope. But with Vidian reinforcements inbound and the threat from Mars looming, Earth's defenders braced themselves for what promised to be the most crucial phase of the conflict yet. As the seventh day bled into the eighth, Colonel Frank Moonwalker, Webb, and his team found themselves in a desperate race against time. The harsh lunar landscape stretched before them as they sprinted towards their hidden spacecraft. The Vidian facility, behind them a hive of frenzied activity. "Move it, people," Webb barked, his voice tinged with urgency. "We've got about 2 minutes before this whole place goes up." The team's modified lunar rover bounced across the cratered surface, its reinforced suspension absorbing the brutal impacts. In the distance, Webb spotted 3 Vidian patrol vehicles giving chase, their alien engines emitting an eerie, high-pitched whine. "Tanner, give me some cover fire," Webb ordered, gripping the rover's controls tightly. Corporal Mike Tanner swiveled in his seat, bringing the mounted railgun to bear. The weapon hummed to life, launching hypervelocity projectiles at their pursuers. One of the Vidian vehicles erupted in a silent explosion, debris scattering across the lunar surface. As they crested a ridge, Webb saw their salvation, a camouflaged hangar nestled in the shadow of a massive crater. He gunned the rover's engine, pushing it to its limits. 30 seconds, he shouted. The team leapt from the rover before it had fully stopped, racing towards their spacecraft. Webb was the last to enter, sealing the airlock behind him. "Everyone strapped in?" he asked, sliding into the pilot's seat. A chorus of affirmatives sounded as Webb's fingers danced across the control panel. The engines roared to life, and the spacecraft lifted off just as the first tremors shook the lunar surface. Webb allowed himself a grim smile as he pulled a small device from his pocket. "Time to light this candle," he muttered, pressing the detonator. Behind them, the Vidian superweapon facility erupted in a massive explosion. The blast sent a plume of lunar dust and debris skyward, creating a temporary eclipse visible from Earth. As their ship rocketed away from the moon, Webb watched the mushroom cloud bloom in eerie silence. "Command, this is Moonwalker," he radioed. "The package has been delivered. I say again, the package has been delivered." Static filled the comms for several long seconds before Admiral Frost's voice crackled through. "Excellent work, Colonel. You've just bought us some much-needed breathing room." As Webb's team made their daring escape, The situation in Earth's orbit was reaching a critical juncture. Admiral Helena Frost stood in the command bunker, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the positions of Earth's remaining orbital assets and the Vidian fleet. "Status on the FDL disruptor?" she demanded. A young technician looked up from his console. "The field is stable and expanding, ma'am. We're seeing widespread disruption of Vidian FDL capabilities across the entire Earth-Moon system." Frost nodded, a plan forming in her mind. Activate the orbital defense network. Target any Vidian ships caught in the disruptor field. Across the globe, hidden silos opened, revealing a network of hastily refurbished orbital defense platforms. These weapons, remnants of various nations' abandoned Star Wars programs, had been pulled out of mothballs and upgraded with reverse-engineered Vidian technology. In orbit, chaos erupted among the alien fleet. Ships attempting to jump to FDL found themselves trapped or materialized in horrific, twisted configurations. The orbital defense platforms opened fire, their energy beams slicing through the vulnerable Vidian vessels. Admiral Frost allowed herself a small smile as she watched the enemy fleet's formations crumble. "Push the advantage," she ordered. "I want those ships destroyed or disabled before they can regroup." As the battle raged in orbit, the conflict on the ground intensified. In New York City, Captain James "Bulldog" Morrison led his team through the darkened subway tunnels. The only illumination coming from their helmet-mounted lights and the occasional spark from damaged electrical systems. "Watch your step," Morrison warned as they navigated around a partially collapsed section of tunnel. "And keep your eyes peeled for those damn drones." The team moved cautiously, pushing a modified subway maintenance vehicle ahead of them. Mounted on its front was a jury-rigged electromagnetic pulse device, cobbled together from salvaged electronics and spare parts. A high-pitched whine filled the air, growing louder by the second. Morrison held up a closed fist, signaling the team to halt. "Here they come," he whispered. The tunnel ahead suddenly filled with a swarm of biomechanical drones, their insectoid forms skittering along the walls and ceiling. Morrison nodded to the team's engineer, who activated the EMP device. A wave of invisible energy pulsed outward, and the drones dropped from the walls like flies. The maintenance vehicle pushed forward, crushing the disabled machines beneath its wheels. "Keep moving," Morrison ordered. "We need to clear this entire line before they can regroup." As Morrison's team reclaimed the underground, a different kind of battle was unfolding in the Pacific. Admiral Hiroshi Tanaka stood on the bridge of the JS Kirishima, watching as transport planes touched down on the newly restored airfield on Guam. "How long until the aircraft are operational?" he asked his aide. "The first squadron should be ready within the hour, sir," the aide replied. "These old birds might not be pretty, but they'll get the job done." Tanaka nodded, his eyes fixed on the horizon where the next group of Vidian-held islands awaited. "We'll need every advantage we can get for the next phase of the operation." As the human forces prepared for their counteroffensive, a new and unexpected development was unfolding in Admiral Frost's command bunker. The air shimmered, and suddenly a holographic figure materialized in the center of the room, a tall, ethereal being with silvery skin and large, almond-shaped eyes. "Greetings, defenders of Earth," the alien spoke, its voice resonating with an otherworldly timbre. "I am Zorthak of the Arcturian Collective. We have been observing your conflict with great interest." Admiral Frost stepped forward, her face a mask of cautious neutrality. "And what is your interest in our war, Zorthak?" The Arcturian's expression shifted in a way that might have been a smile. "We have long opposed the Vidian expansion. We offer you an alliance, our advanced technology and military support in exchange for a foothold in your solar system once victory is achieved." A murmur ran through the assembled staff. Frost's mind raced, weighing the potential benefits against the risks of allowing another alien power to gain influence over Earth. "This is not a decision I can make unilaterally," Frost said carefully. I will need to consult with what remains of our government. Zorthak inclined his head. Of course. But be aware, Admiral, that time is of the essence. The Vidian construct in Mars' orbit grows more dangerous by the moment. As if to emphasize the alien's point, an alert sounded from one of the monitoring stations. A technician called out, "Admiral, we're detecting a massive energy buildup from the Mars structure. It looks like they're preparing to fire." Frost turned back to the hologram, her expression grim. "It seems, Zorthak, that we have much to discuss and very little time in which to do it. Frost's eyes narrowed as she considered the Arcturians' offer and the looming threat from Mars. Before she could respond, the bunker erupted into a flurry of activity. Technicians shouted updates as new data flooded their screens, painting a grim picture of the escalating conflict. "Admiral," her aide called out, "we're receiving reports of simultaneous Vidian attacks on major cities worldwide. New York, Tokyo, Berlin, they're all under heavy assault." Frost's eyes hardened. She turned to Zorthak, the holographic alien shimmering in the dim light of the command center. "Your offer is noted, but Earth needs immediate action. What can you provide us right now?" The Arcturian's eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity. "We can transmit schematics for a device that will disrupt Vidian biosuit systems. It's not a permanent solution, but it will buy you time." Frost nodded curtly. "Do it. We'll discuss further terms later." She spun to face her staff. "Initiate Operation Thunderstrike. All available forces are to engage the enemy using every resource at our disposal." As the bunker buzzed with activity, Frost authorized the global counteroffensive. Within minutes, strike teams around the world sprang into action, armed with hastily constructed sound emitters based on the Arcturian schematics. In New York City, Captain James Morrison led his team through the debris-strewn streets towards the former United Nations building. The towering structure, now a grotesque amalgamation of Earth architecture and alien technology, loomed before them. "Remember," Morrison growled to his squad, "hit them with the sound waves first, then move in fast and hard. We take this building, we take back New York." The team activated their sound emitters, filling the air with an ear-splitting screech. Vidian defenders stumbled and faltered, their biosuits malfunctioning under the assault. Morrison's team surged forward, breaching the building's defenses and fighting their way upward, floor by floor. Across the Pacific, Admiral Hiroshi Tanaka stood on the bridge of the JS Kirishima, watching as waves of landing craft approached the shores of Okinawa. The sky above was filled with the throaty roar of restored vintage fighters, their guns blazing as they strafed Vidian positions. "First wave is hitting the beach now, sir," his aide reported. Tanaka nodded grimly. "Send in the second wave. We take this island despite the toll." The battle for Okinawa raged on, a crucial linchpin in humanity's counteroffensive. As human forces pushed inland, they encountered fierce resistance from the alien defenders, but the tide was slowly turning. In orbit, Major Sarah Hawkins and her team worked feverishly aboard the disabled Vidian vessel. Their hands moved with practiced efficiency as they extracted key components and planted explosive charges. "That's the last of it," Hawkins announced, securing a final piece of alien tech. "Let's get the hell out of here." The team scrambled into their waiting Soyuz capsule, detaching from the Vidian ship just as the charges detonated. The resulting explosion triggered a chain reaction, engulfing nearby alien vessels in a fiery conflagration. As the capsule hurtled towards Earth, Hawkins allowed herself a small smile. "Command, this is Stargazer. Package secured and en route. Vidian fleet has sustained significant damage." On the lunar surface, Colonel Frank Webb and his team raced towards their hidden spacecraft, Vidian pursuit vehicles hot on their heels. Webb's fingers flew over the controls as they lifted off, narrowly avoiding enemy fire. "Hang on," he shouted as he piloted the craft through the debris field left by the destroyed superweapon facility. Chunks of twisted metal and rock pinged off their hull as they wove a treacherous path towards Earth. As they broke free of the lunar gravity well, Webb began transmitting the vital data they'd gathered. "Command, this is Moonwalker. We've got the goods. Vidian defense schematics, tech specs, the works. Uploading now." In Berlin, General Hans Muller coordinated the assault on the Vidian stronghold from a mobile command center. The city echoed with the thunder of restored vintage tanks and the crackle of electromagnetic pulse weapons. "Push forward," Muller ordered as a squad armed with acoustic disruptors moved into position. "We'll drive these bastards from our city street by street if we have to." The battle raged on, a brutal urban conflict that saw human forces slowly but surely reclaiming their territory. The Vidian defenders, their protective biosuits rendered useless by the disruptive frequency, began to fall back. In the Atlas Mountains, Colonel Alexei Volkov oversaw the distribution of newly manufactured acoustic weapons to resistance groups across Africa and the Middle East. Reports flooded in of successful operations in Cairo, Tehran, and Lagos as human forces pushed back against the alien invaders. Meanwhile, in Chicago, General Victor Ramirez climbed into the cockpit of a prototype human-piloted walker. The hybrid machine, a fusion of Vidian and human technology, towered over the surrounding buildings. "All units, this is Ramirez," he called over the comm. "We're moving on Detroit. Let's show these aliens what happens when they mess with human ingenuity." The squad of walkers stomped through the ruins of the Midwest, their heavy footfalls shaking the earth. As they approached the outskirts of Detroit, the Vidian defenders scrambled to mount a defense against this unexpected threat. Just as Operation Thunderstrike seemed to be turning the tide, a blinding flash lit up the sky. The mysterious structure in Mars' orbit had activated, firing a massive energy beam towards the asteroid field created by Operation Roadblock. In the command bunker, Admiral Frost watched in horror as the beam's impact sent a swarm of fractured asteroids hurtling towards Earth. She turned to her staff, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. "Redirect all available orbital assets to intercept those asteroids," she ordered. "And get me a secure line to the Arcturian representative. We need to make a decision about their offer, and we need to make it now." As the 8th day of the invasion drew to a close, humanity stood at a crossroads. The success of Operation Thunderstrike had given Earth's defenders a fighting chance, but the Vidian counterattack from Mars threatened to undo all their hard-won progress. With time running out and the fate of the planet hanging in the balance, Admiral Frost prepared to make the most important decision of her life, and potentially the most important decision in human history. Admiral Frost's eyes locked with Zorthax, her decision crystallizing in the face of Earth's dire situation. "Very well," she said, her voice firm. "We accept your immediate assistance. Further negotiations for a long-term alliance will follow once this crisis is averted." The holographic alien nodded, his form shimmering. "Understood, Admiral. Our forces are en route." Within moments, the bunker sensors lit up with new signatures. Arcturian ships materialized in Earth orbit, their sleek forms bypassing the FTL disruptor field with ease. The newcomers wasted no time, engaging the Vidian fleet with devastating precision. Outside, the night sky erupted in a dazzling display of light and energy as Arcturian weapons tore through Vidian ships. The trapped alien vessels, caught between Earth's defenses and their new adversaries, began to crumble under the assault. Frost turned to her communications officer. "Get me a line to all our forces. It's time to push our advantage." As Frost coordinated the global counteroffensive, Arcturian ground forces deployed to key battlefields around the world. In New York City, Captain James Morrison and his team found themselves fighting alongside these new alien allies. Morrison crouched behind a crumbling wall, his eyes widening as he saw an Arcturian warrior materialize beside him. The alien silvery skin gleamed in the dim light, its energy shield deflecting debris from nearby explosions. "I am Krelvor," the Arcturian said, its voice a melodious hum. "We fight together now." Morrison nodded, gesturing toward the Vidian-controlled UN building. "We're pushing for that structure. It's the key to taking back the city." Krelvor raised a sleek weapon, pulsing with energy. "Then let us not delay." The combined human and Arcturian forces surged forward. Energy weapons and acoustic disruptors fired in tandem, creating a cacophony of destruction. Vidian defenders fell before the onslaught, their biosuits failing under the barrage of sound and plasma. As they fought their way through the twisted corridors of the UN building, Morrison couldn't help but marvel at the Arcturians' combat prowess. Their movements were fluid, almost graceful, as they dispatched Vidian after Vidian. In the Pacific, Admiral Tanaka stood on the bridge of the JS Kirishima, watching in awe as Arcturian aircraft joined the battle for Okinawa. The alien fighters moved with impossible speed and precision, their energy weapons carving through Vidian defenses with minimal resistance. "Sir," his aide called out, "our ground forces report rapid advancement across the island. The Vidians are falling back to their northern bunker complex." Tanaka allowed himself a small smile. "Press the advantage. We'll have Okinawa back by nightfall." Meanwhile, in the Atlas Mountains, Colonel Volkov found his weapons production facility suddenly bustling with activity. Arcturian engineers moved among the human workers, their long fingers dancing over control panels and assembly lines. An Arcturian approached Volkov, its large eyes blinking slowly. "We have integrated our focusing systems with your acoustic technology. The result is most effective." Volkov picked up one of the new hybrid weapons, feeling its weight and balance. "How soon can we begin mass production?" The Arcturian's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "We already have." As dawn broke on the 9th day of the war, General Ramirez climbed into the cockpit of his walker, now gleaming with newly integrated Arcturian technology. The energy shield hummed to life around the massive machine, casting a faint blue glow. "All units, this is Ramirez," he called over the comm. "We're moving on Minneapolis. Let's show these Vidians what Earth and Arcturus can do together." The enhanced walkers stomped across the Midwest, their thunderous footfalls a prelude to the coming battle. As they approached Minneapolis, Ramirez saw Vidian forces scrambling to mount a defense. But against the combined might of human purpose and Arcturian technology, their efforts seemed futile. In orbit, Major Sarah Hawkins found herself coordinating with Arcturian ships to intercept the incoming asteroid swarm. She watched in amazement as the alien vessels deployed tractor beams, gently nudging the larger rocks off course. "Earth Defense Command, this is Stargazer," she reported. "Arcturian ships are successfully deflecting the largest asteroids, requesting permission to engage smaller fragments with our missile systems." As Hawkins and her team worked to neutralize the asteroid threat, long-range sensors detected a new danger. A massive Vidian fleet had appeared at the edge of the solar system, hundreds of warships strong. But before Frost could issue new orders, another alert sounded. A second fleet had materialized to meet the Vidians, Arcturian reinforcements, positioning themselves as an outer defensive line. The space around Jupiter erupted in a spectacular battle, energy weapons and missiles lighting up the gas giant's atmosphere. The fate of Earth hung in the balance as the two alien armadas clashed in the outer solar system. Back in the command bunker, Admiral Frost watched the holographic display of the battle with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The Arcturian alliance had given them a fighting chance, but the war was not nearly finished. She turned to her staff, her voice steady and determined. "Prepare for the next phase of operations. We need to capitalize on these gains and push the Vidians out of our solar system once and for all." As the 10th day of the post-MP war approached, humanity stood poised on the brink of a new era. With their Arcturian allies by their side, they prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead, ready to fight for their place among the stars. As the 10th day of the post-MP war dawned, the conflict reached its crescendo. The space around Jupiter erupted into a dazzling display of advanced weaponry as Arcturian and Vidian fleets clashed in a titanic struggle. Earth's long-range sensors, now augmented with Arcturian technology, suddenly detected an ominous energy surge from the Vidian flagship. Admiral Frost, Lieutenant Commander Chun called out, his voice tight with urgency. "We're picking up a massive power buildup in the enemy's main vessel. Energy readings are off the charts." Frost's eyes narrowed as she studied the holographic display. "Analysis? It appears to be some kind of superweapon, ma'am," Chin replied, his fingers flying over the controls. "Capable of... oh, God! It could wipe out entire planets." The command bunker fell silent as the implications sank in. Frost's mind raced, weighing options and calculating risks. After a moment, she straightened, her decision made. "Initiate Operation Trojan Horse," she ordered, her voice steady. "And get me General Morrison." Within minutes, a joint team of Earth's elite soldiers and Arcturian special forces assembled in a hidden facility on Europa. At their head stood the newly promoted General James Bulldog Morrison, his face set with unyielding commitment. "Listen up." Morrison addressed the assembled warriors, human and alien alike. "We've got one shot at this. We're going to use a captured Vidian shuttle to slip past their defenses and board that flagship. Our mission is to neutralize that superweapon before they can use it. Failure is not an option." As Morrison's team prepared for their daring assault, Earth's combined forces launched a coordinated attack across all fronts. General Victor Ramirez, seated in the command chair of his walker, surveyed the battlefield before him. A sea of hybrid human-Vidian Arcturian war machines stretched as far as the eye could see, their massive forms gleaming in the morning sun. "All units, this is Ramirez," he called over the comm. "Today, we take back our home. For Earth." The ground shook as the walkers surged forward, their weapons blazing. Vidian defensive positions crumbled under the onslaught, unable to withstand the combined might of three civilizations' technologies. Meanwhile, in orbit, Major Sarah Hawkins led a squadron of retrofitted human spacecraft, now overflowing with Arcturian weaponry. Her fingers danced over the controls, maneuvering her ship through a deadly ballet of energy beams and missile fire. "Stargazer Squadron, form up on me," she ordered. "We need to keep these bastards busy while Morrison's team does their job." As Hawkins and her pilots engaged the Vidian orbital forces, Morrison's infiltration team approached the massive alien flagship. Their modified shuttle slipped through the chaotic battle undetected, its captured IFF codes fooling the enemy sensors. Inside the shuttle, Morrison turned to Krelvor, his Arcturian second-in-command. "Once we're aboard, we'll have to move fast. You take your team to the engine room and plant those charges. We'll head for the weapon control center." The alien nodded, its silvery skin shimmering. "Understood, General. May your aim be true." With a shudder, the shuttle docked with the Vidian flagship. The infiltration team poured out, immediately engaging the surprised alien defenders. The corridor erupted in a cacophony of weapons fire and shouted orders. Morrison ducked behind a bulkhead, his pulse rifle spitting death at the Vidian soldiers. Beside him, an Earth Marine and an Arcturian warrior worked in perfect tandem, their disparate fighting styles complementing each other flawlessly. "Push forward," Morrison shouted, leading the charge down the twisting alien corridors. They fought their way through waves of defenders, the ship's internal alarms blaring in their ears. After what felt like hours of intense combat, Morrison's team finally reached the superweapons control room. The massive chamber was dominated by a pulsing orb of energy, crackling with awe-inspiring power. As they burst through the doors, Morrison found himself face to face with the Vidian Grand Admiral. The alien leader's four eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with grit. Without a word, it drew a wicked-looking energy blade and lunged at Morrison. The two leaders engaged in a furious duel, their weapons clashing in a shower of sparks. Around them, human and Arcturian soldiers battled with the weapon control crew, racing against time to sabotage the device before it could fire. Morrison parried a vicious strike, then countered with a swift kick that sent the Vidian stumbling backward. He pressed his advantage, driving the alien back step by step. With a final, powerful blow, he knocked the energy blade from the Grand Admiral's grasp. The Vidian leader fell to its knees, defeated. Morrison stood over his fallen foe, his weapon raised for the killing blow. But in that moment, he hesitated. "It's over," Morrison said, lowering his rifle. "Call off your forces. End this war before more lives are lost." The Grand Admiral looked up, its alien features unreadable. For a long moment, silence reigned in the control room, broken only by the hum of machinery and the distant sounds of battle. Then, slowly, the Vidian reached for its communication device. "All Vidian forces," it spoke, its voice echoing throughout the ship and across the entire fleet. "Stand down. I repeat, stand down. The war is over." As the words reverberated across the solar system, the fighting gradually came to a halt. In orbit around Earth, on the ground, and in the space near Jupiter, weapons fell silent. A stunned disbelief settled over the battlefield, as if neither side could quite believe what had just happened. In the command bunker, Admiral Frost watched the holographic display as Vidian ships powered down their weapons. A cheer began to build among her staff, but she raised a hand for silence. "It's not over yet," she said, her voice carrying across the room. "Contact the Arcturian command. We need to establish a ceasefire and open negotiations. The real work is just beginning." As the initial shock of the Vidian surrender wore off, the enormity of the task ahead began to sink in. Earth had survived its trial by fire, but the road to recovery and lasting peace would be long and challenging. Yet as Frost looked at the faces of her staff, human and alien alike, she felt a glimmer of hope for the future. The war was over, but a new chapter in Earth's history was just beginning to unfold.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.